Our story begins at the gates of the free city of Landless. Inside the gatehouse, a carriage driver is stopped for a routine inspection. A young, fresh-faced guard waves the traveler through without a second thought. His partner remarks how busy the city has been since the old lord's passing. But the young guard suddenly freezes, a strange feeling washing over him. He turns to find a towering, pig-faced man looming over his shoulder. The soldier is struck silent, his mind struggling to process what he's seeing. A single, terrified word escapes his lips. Orc. The creature, easily over 2 meters tall, is clearly not here for the local cuisine. The guard's panic fixates on the absurd details, the strange skin, and the sunglasses. The creature calmly takes a drag from a thick, hand-rolled cigar. The guard's eyes trace the bulging veins on its impossibly thick arm. And then, the monster speaks, its voice a low and intelligent rumble. The young guard can only stare, his mind struggling to accept what's real. Its gaze, hidden behind dark glasses, feels like a physical weight. His partner and 2 other guards finally react, forming a defensive line. But the creature seems more annoyed than threatened by their pointed spears. Finding a sliver of courage, the young guard demands to know its purpose. The orc simply smirks, claiming he's half-human, which is a bold claim. He lowers his glasses to reveal eyes that are anything but. The guard's terrified face is reflected in those crimson, slitted pupils. His comrades curse the creature, their fear hardening into revulsion. The orc lets out a weary sigh, clearly unimpressed by the welcome party. He then casually tosses a mountain of paperwork right at the guards. Stunned, the guards confirm every single document is authentic. While they're busy, he casually relights his cigar with a magical spark. The young guard can only stammer, wondering what this creature truly is. He exhales a thick plume of smoke, his patience clearly wearing thin. He introduces himself with a name, Elpis, a registered adventurer. And he asks a simple question: is there any reason he can't enter their city? The young guard can only grit his teeth, his authority utterly shattered. His partner reluctantly concedes that Elpis's paperwork is flawless. He gives the adventurer a stern warning not to cause any trouble. With a dismissive wave, he orders the massive creature to move along. But Elpis just smirks, claiming his keen sense of smell knows all. He then brings up the monk-like man who passed through just before him. He advises the guards to investigate that traveler a little more closely. He reveals the man's amulet is hiding the distinct scent of narcotics. And just like that, the monster does a better job guarding the gate than the actual guards. As Elpis walks away, the guards are left stunned by his sharp perception. With his business at the gate concluded, Elpis strides into the city proper. He seems completely unfazed by the confrontation, ready for the next task. His destination is a familiar sight in any city, the Adventurers Guild. A tiny, cloaked companion observes that this particular guild includes a tavern. Without hesitation, he pushes open the heavy wooden doors. Elpis steps inside, his massive frame filling the doorway and silencing the room. His sharp eyes immediately begin to scan the guild's interior. The local adventurers are a motley crew, and none look particularly welcoming. He takes in their hostile stares, his expression hardening slightly. Others in the guild seem less hostile and more intimidated by his arrival. Unbothered, Elpis takes a long drag from his cigar, smoke curling around him. From a balcony above, 2 silent figures watch the scene unfold. He lets out a low growl, muttering that it's the same reaction in every city. He tells his companion that he's used to the cold, judgmental stares. Elpis finally reaches the counter, ready to get down to business. But the guild receptionist's eye is anything but human, with a slitted reptilian pupil. The man bluntly asks if this half-blood is going to be a problem. The patrons murmur about the city's decline since the Countess's death a year ago. The bartender slams a hand on the counter, impatiently demanding his order. Without missing a beat, Elpis simply asks for a whiskey. The bartender leans in, asking if he knows anything about the local food. Elpis's face falls, his hopes for a familiar meal seemingly dashed. He settles for local spirits and whatever the kitchen can throw together. The bartender stares him down, demanding a steep price of 5 silver coins. Elpis is outraged, accusing the man of blatant price gouging. The tavern owner is unmoved, telling him to pay the price or leave. With a frustrated sigh, Elpis tosses the silver onto the bar. He takes a seat, still fuming over the tavern's special pricing for half-orcs. But his grumbling is interrupted as the server approaches with his order. And what arrives is not just food, but a magnificent, steaming platter. A frothy mug of dark ale is placed before him, promising to wash away his fatigue. Elpis's anger melts away, replaced by the pure, simple joy of a good meal. He notes that both the food and the ale look surprisingly high quality. His only complaint is the modern glass mug instead of a proper ceramic stein. He inspects the drink's deep, almost black color, his reflection staring back. Taking a deep breath, he savors the complex aroma of citrus and fruit. Deciding it's worth a try, he takes a long, satisfying gulp, but his moment of peace is shattered by a bottle flying through the air. It smashes against the wall right beside him, a clear act of aggression. Elpis lets out a weary sigh, more annoyed than surprised by the attack. The culprit is revealed, a man with fury burning in his eyes. The source of the conflict is a young woman berating her party members. She declares that it should be an honor for them to join her party. She strikes a dramatic pose, introducing herself as Margit von Margareta. Her gloved hand clenches, emphasizing her dramatic declaration. Her eyes sparkle with an almost delusional level of confidence. And the art makes it very clear what her two biggest assets are. She stomps her foot, demanding attention from the entire guild. Elpis can only look on, completely baffled by the sudden theatrics. Margit laughs triumphantly, utterly oblivious to her surroundings. Her former companion scoffs, dismissing her as a fallen noble playing dress-up. But she proudly announces she reached E rank in a record-breaking 5 days. The men are left utterly speechless by her accomplishment. The entire guild is stunned, as E rank is the absolute bottom of the barrel. Elpis can only watch, the second-hand embarrassment physically hurting him. Margit, however, seems genuinely confused by the lack of cheering. She strikes another dramatic pose, declaring this the start of a legend. In her mind, she envisions a future leading legions of adoring followers. She winks, radiating a level of confidence that is truly unearned. But back in reality, she's just the center of a very confused, silent room. The guild patrons finally break their silence, erupting in laughter at her claim. Elpis can barely watch, covering his face in a wave of second-hand shame. Margit's triumphant smile falters, replaced by utter, horrified disbelief. She whirls on her former comrades, demanding to know what's so funny. They mockingly explain that her feat is just grunt work for any new recruit. The self-proclaimed super rookie is left stammering and utterly humiliated. Elpis lets out a heavy sigh, his meal thoroughly interrupted by the drama. But a flicker of amusement crosses his face. This is better than tavern music. The argument spills outside, where the men now ridicule her flashy attire. She stands her ground, proudly declaring the outfit was a gift from her father. Her gloved hand clenches into a tight, furious fist. She screams at them, her pride wounded by their insolence. But her former party members just laugh, mocking her noble pride. The 3 men begin to close in, their intentions turning sinister. They grab her, sneering that they're collecting the evil lord's assets. With fire in her eyes, she fiercely defends her father's honor. The ringleader grins, claiming the whole city celebrated her father's death. His words strike her like a physical blow, her confidence shattering. The cruel taunt cuts deep, planting a seed of doubt and pain. He cackles, adding that her father died a pathetic, drunken death. The argument ends as Margit is violently thrown back into the tavern. The ringleader gloats that her father's death is what made this a free city. They corner her in the alley, calling her the daughter of a wicked lord. Her noble blood means nothing to them now. Their intentions are clear. Back at his table, Elpis's dinner entertainment just got a lot darker. A single tear escapes her eye, her pride finally cracking under their hate. She collapses to the ground, trembling with a mixture of fear and rage. A silent scream of pure, helpless frustration echoes in her mind. But someone has been listening, and his patience has finally run out. The man's cruelty culminates in a sharp, vicious slap across her face. The sound of the blow hangs in the air, a line finally crossed. In her despair, Margit can only whisper her father's name. From his table, Elpis lets out a low, dangerous growl. She remembers a time when a hand on her head meant only kindness. Elpis watches the scene, his reflection hiding a gathering storm. And in an instant, the storm breaks, his patience utterly shattered. The ringleader freezes, a primal fear seizing his very soul. He's left wondering what happened, his face now intimately familiar with the floor. Margit looks up through her tears, stunned by the sudden intervention. Elpis stands over the thug, his hand pressing the man into the dirt. Her eyes widen in shock, a silent gasp escaping her lips. He offers a hand, a silent gesture to help her to her feet. A deep blush spreads across her face as she looks away. Flustered, she looks up at her savior, a tiny figure before a veritable giant. Elpis walks on, muttering about the sickening feeling in his gut. The two stand facing each other, a silent understanding passing between them. She realizes that her earlier terror has completely vanished. She recalls the feeling of his hand, a source of unexpected warmth. And through that simple touch, she felt his anger on her behalf. He looms over the fallen men, sarcastically complimenting their new position. Elpis calmly asks the man how much he paid for his meal. The other two thugs can only stare, confused by the sudden interrogation. He clarifies, asking what their food and drink cost them. The men exchange nervous glances, unsure how to answer. One of them finally stammers out the price, a mere 3 copper coins. Elpis reveals he was charged 5 silver, a price hundreds of times higher. The revelation only makes the thugs erupt in mocking laughter. The ringleader sneers that it was a nuisance fee, clearly a master of customer service. They turn their venom back on Margit, calling her the daughter of a villain, and they finish by calling Elpis a half-breed bastard, sealing their fate. The ringleader doubles down, offering a price for the half-orc's head. Elpis looms over them, his voice dripping with contempt for humanity. The thug is left utterly confused by the half-orc's strange logic. Margit watches on, a flicker of something new in her tear-filled eyes. With a snarl, Elpis decides it's time to teach them some manners. A brutal slam sends the man's world into a splintered mess. Margit looks on in shock as sweat drips from the enraged half-orc. The 3 thugs are now nothing more than decorations on the tavern floor. Even from the floor, the thug tries to assert his non-existent authority. But Elpis is just getting warmed up, his fury burning away the sweat. Elpis tells them the cheap swill they drink is all they're worthy of. From above, the scene is clear. 1 giant, 3 fools, and a stunned noblewoman. He declares he'll teach them a lesson about the culture they're too crude to understand. Margit can only watch, completely bewildered by this half-orc's strange priorities. The ringleader finally snaps, grabbing Elpis and telling him to shut his mouth. His eyes burn with rage as he spits out a final fatal insult. He even mocks the half-orc's sunglasses, a truly terrible last decision. And Elpis responds with a punch that redefines the term overkill. The thug becomes a human cannonball, launched across the tavern floor. He smashes into the far wall, leaving a permanent impression on the masonry. The thug is launched with such force, he punches a new skylight in the tavern roof. Elpis calmly delivers a simple lesson. Never touch another man's face. He watches the thug become a star, complaining that the violence ruined his drink. Margit is left utterly speechless, her jaw practically on the floor. But Elpis just turns away, grumbling about how he hates a woman's tears. She tries to get his attention, her voice barely a whisper. He drapes a coat over her shoulders, a surprisingly chivalrous gesture. She attempts to thank him, but he seems more concerned with his broken table. His eyes scan the floor, mourning the true victims of this brawl. His appetizers. As he picks up a piece of food, she asks if he's really going to eat that. Elpis simply states that it would be a waste of the cook's effort. His simple words seem to strike a chord with the young noblewoman. Through her tears, a genuine, heartfelt smile begins to form. Even his tiny companion seems pleased by this turn of events. Suddenly, the bartender returns with a fresh, steaming platter of food. He gruffly explains it's a thank you for taking out the trash. Elpis is left momentarily speechless by the unexpected kindness. The bartender adds that from now on, his price is only 2 silver. With the drama settled, Elpis can finally enjoy his hard-earned meal. Margit, now seated with him, formally asks for her savior's name. His companion points out they already heard her name given her loud introduction. With a dazzling smile, Margit boldly asks Elpis to form a party with her. Elpis just stares back, bluntly asking if her eyes are completely useless. Her confident expression immediately deflates into an indignant pout. He reminds her that he's a half-orc, a walking magnet for trouble. But she waves it off, claiming she's used to a bad reputation herself. Elpis retorts that for him, being hated isn't a phase, it's a lifestyle. He tells her that, unlike him, she's a noble with a home to return to. His words seem to strike a nerve, her earlier bravado fading away. Her hand tightens into a fist, a silent sign of her inner turmoil. Her expression hardens, a flicker of defiance in her tear-stained eyes. She asks if he's searching for something, claiming she knows exactly what it is. With a confident smile, she names a specific rare brand of whiskey. Elpis is stunned into silence by her unexpected and accurate guess. The story then shifts, revealing a young noble facing a terrible prophecy. A letter from the future details a life of utter humiliation and failure. The recipient, a young boy, is told there are no second chances for him. He stares at the letter, a message from the man he is doomed to become. The grim future is laid bare, defeat, disownment, and a broken engagement. An attendant rushes in, calling out the boy's name in a panic. Herbert! The young boy, Herbert, can only stare, his mind reeling from the prophecy. His shock gives way to a flustered, nervous sweat as the reality sets in. His attendant tries to reassure him, suggesting the letter might be a cruel joke. But Herbert clutches the parchment, his turmoil written all over his face. He curses his inability to hide his feelings, knowing his father will notice. He examines the letter again, noting the strange script is not his own. There's no seal, no signature, nothing to identify the mysterious sender. The attendant then reveals the letter arrived via a swirling vortex of dark magic. A new message appears on the scroll, offering a delayed introduction. The sender reveals himself. He is Herbert, 20 years in the future. The attendant realizes the impossible. This is the work of time-space magic, a legendary power once used by ancient sages to seal away the Demon King himself. Its fabled abilities, like teleportation and time travel, are now considered myths. Herbert clutches the letter, the impossible weight of its message crushing him. He wonders if it's a cruel joke, but the evidence is too strong to ignore. The letter is real, and its implications are world-shattering for the young boy. A stunning conclusion begins to form in his mind, swallowing his fear. If his future self sent this, it means he has the talent for time-space magic. The despair from the prophecy begins to recede, replaced by a flicker of hope, and for the first time, a small, determined smile touches his lips. He clutches the letter, a wide, almost manic grin spreading across his face. Herbert erupts into triumphant laughter, his attendant watching with growing concern. The words time-space magic echo in his mind, a key to a new destiny. He realizes that with this legendary power, he can rewrite his own grim future. His small hand clenches into a fist, feeling the weight of this new potential. A determined smirk forms as he vows to make everyone acknowledge his strength. But just as quickly, a foot stomps down on the prophetic letter. His future self's words mock him, asking if he expected praise for his new power. The harsh reality of the message sends a jolt of shock through the young boy. He collapses, the letter questioning if he truly has the will to change his fate. The letter explains there are no second chances, not because he can't, but because he won't. His future self lays out the brutal truth. His failures weren't bad luck. They were the direct result of his own flawed character. A single damning accusation hangs in the air. His very nature is rotten. The words tremble in his hands, a verdict from a future he created. The accusation hits him like a physical blow, and he erupts in furious denial. He stomps his foot, rejecting the very idea that he is the problem. His attendant can only watch, calling his name with growing concern. The young noble screams that no one has ever dared to say such a thing to him. But the seed of doubt has been planted, and it's already taking root. He collapses to his knees, the harsh truth finally sinking in. He realizes no one ever corrected him because he was the heir to a ducal house. The prophetic letter lies crumpled on the floor, a testament to his shattered pride. But he can't look away, forced to pick up the pieces of his broken future. The letter's next line is a gut punch. He has no charm as a human being. Visions of his future failures flash before his eyes, a life of humiliation. He sees the cold, disapproving stares of the very people who once praised him. And he sees the documents that will seal his fate, stained with his own tears. The letter warns that the bill for his arrogance is coming due very soon. His denial finally breaks and he screams that he already knows it's all true. His attendant can only watch, admitting he'd pretended not to see the boy's flaws. Herbert screams that he's always managed to get by on his name alone until now. In the cold rain, the young noble's world comes crashing down around him. The letter details every failure: disownment, a lost duel, a broken engagement. And to twist the knife, it reveals even his loyal attendant Kevin will die. The only sound is the rain and the heartbroken sobs of a boy facing his doom. All his pride shatters, replaced by the raw, desperate wail of a child. It is a truly undignified cry, complete with tears, snot, and everything. Kevin rushes to comfort him as the letter from the future continues its message. It reveals that it took 20 long years to reclaim everything he was about to lose. The letter continues, a confession from a broken man who tried his best. But for all his efforts, he lost far more than he ever managed to save. By the time he understood his folly, his fate was already sealed. But the letter offers a single desperate hope. Young Herbert can still succeed. The only condition is that he must never forget the regret he feels right now. The scene then transitions, pulling away from the rain-soaked room. We're shown a memory of a younger Herbert in a sunlit gazebo with an older figure. Even back then, a quiet determination burned behind the young boy's eyes. Herbert's inner voice admits he hated confronting the ugliest parts of himself. Kevin confesses he never wanted to know about such a bleak, sealed future. His small hand clenches into a fist, a spark of defiance finally igniting. He shouts into the empty air, vowing that he absolutely refuses to lose everything. The letter offers his first instruction: resume the hard work he has long since abandoned. As a new day dawns, Herbert stares out the window, his resolve hardening with the light. The next command is clear: face the upcoming duel with the will to die trying. His future self explains that this duel, which he started, is the very crossroads of his destiny. And with that knowledge, Herbert understands that this is where his new life truly begins. A vision of the man he could become flashes in his mind, confident and serene. A man who walked a long, hard road just to send this message back through time. Turning to his loyal attendant, Herbert prepares to give his first real command. Kevin listens intently, ready to carry out his young master's orders. Herbert asks him to find the head martial officer, a man named Rodeo. The scene cuts to a stern-looking man with a monocle and an impressive mustache. The message is a request for special training, a task Herbert has long neglected. With a new sense of purpose, Kevin sprints off to deliver the message. He wonders what was in that letter, but decides it's probably best not to ask. All he knows is that it transformed the boy's face from despair to pure determination. In his heart, Herbert makes a solemn vow to his late grandfather. He will work harder than anyone to support his family's name. Talk about a productive existential crisis. Elsewhere, the man he seeks is already hard at work, sweat dripping from his chin. Kevin delivers the message, his urgent expression catching the officer's attention. The scene transitions, a symbolic welcome for the young lord's return to form. We cut to a lavish bar, where a wealthy patron calls out to someone named Elpis. His companion, a masked youth, boasts that his wealth is as endless as the bar's menu. The story then flashes back to an older, pig-faced man, his expression one of pure irritation. The masked youth's condescending smile confirms he was the source of the trouble. He recalls thinking that such a creature was one of a kind on the entire continent. The memory shows the pig man passed out drunk, completely at the youth's mercy. But the creature suddenly jolts awake, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated panic. Back in the present, the masked youth's eye glints, reliving the chaotic memory. The memory culminates in a woman straddling Elpis, wishing him a good morning. The half-orc's mind flashes back to the night before, a cold sweat breaking out. He recalls a drinking contest where his tiny companion somehow outlasted him. The woman from his bed smirks, declaring that last night's victory was hers. His hand clenches the sheets, the memory of his defeat still stinging. His mind reels, struggling to piece together the events of the night. His gaze is drawn to her shirt, which is fighting a losing battle, and he becomes acutely aware of the weight pressing down on him. He can only stare up at her, demanding to know what is happening. She leans in close, mocking him for letting a woman best him in a contest. Elpis can only stammer, his mind a cocktail of confusion and regret. She grins, declaring that as per their agreement, he's now her new party member. The half-orc's face contorts in a silent scream of pure, unadulterated horror. His tough guy persona completely evaporates, leaving only a defeated pigman. The art style itself seems to be mocking his profound misery. The story then cuts back to the present, outside the Landless Adventurers Guild. On the roof, workers marvel at the strange, scale-like tiles. Inside, a different conversation is taking place at the main counter. A cheerful dwarven receptionist patiently explains the rules to a familiar face. Margit slams her hands on the desk in frustration, while Elpis stews in his own defeat. The dwarven receptionist explains that forming a party requires a formal screening. Margit is completely baffled by this sudden bureaucratic hurdle. The rules are simple. A party needs at least 2 C-rank adventurers, but the receptionist adds that the guild welcomes anyone who can prove their strength. Margit complains about the city's outcasts, even insulting her new partner. Elpis ignores her, his attention focused on a small object in his hand. With a sharp click, he reveals a rather ornate-looking cigar cutter. The receptionist suggests they take on a quest to prove their capabilities. Margit seems to think they don't have time for such trivialities. Elpis, however, seems perfectly content to light up another cigar. Elpis takes a drag from his cigar, stating he doesn't turn down a challenge. He exhales a thick cloud of smoke, his decision filling the air. The dwarven receptionist is suddenly jolted by his easy acceptance. She nervously confirms that a certain high-stakes quest is indeed available. With a cheerful wave, she scurries off to retrieve the quest details. Margit turns away, muttering about how they're being underestimated. But her frustration quickly hardens into a look of fierce determination. Elpis watches her, a smirk playing on his lips at her fiery attitude. She suddenly spins around, a brilliant, almost manic grin on her face, and without warning she latches onto his arm, ready to drag him to glory. She complains that he's pulling too hard, her priorities clearly in order. The quest they're being offered is a simple one. Hunt down a creature called a haggis. An adventurer with an eye patch explains that the creatures have been multiplying in the nearby forests. Elpis clarifies for his companion that they're just a type of hostile monster. The man adds that while small, they are vicious and specifically target humans. Elpis cuts through the chatter, asking the only question that really matters. What's the reward? The eye patch-wearing man's gaze narrows, sizing up the new adventurer. He names the price, 5 silver coins, the exact amount Elpis was overcharged for his meal. Margit, now masked and ready for battle, enthusiastically accepts the quest for them both. The dwarven receptionist beams, happy to see Elpis taking on the challenge. Elpis is left stunned, the reward hitting a little too close to home. The story then cuts away to a mysterious wax-sealed letter being delivered. The conversation in the guild turns to the city's new lord. A man named Oruto Oratorio is revealed, his smile dripping with arrogance. Elpis's expression hardens as the chapter comes to a dramatic close. We learn Oruto is not just an A-rank adventurer, but the new ruler of Landless. His smug confidence suggests he's a man who always gets what he wants. The realization dawns on Elpis. He's in the territory of a powerful new player. Margit, meanwhile, seems to be having a completely different, much louder reaction. She strikes a pose outside the guild, ready to charge headfirst into their new quest. But their quest is interrupted by the arrival of a new player, his armored boot splashing into a puddle. The city's new lord, Oruto Oratorio, appears behind Elpis with a condescending smirk. He dismisses our half-orc, claiming he's never heard of an adventurer named Elpis. Elpis is stunned by the man's speed, wondering if he used magic to appear so suddenly. Oruto recalls the report from the gate. A half-orc with flawless, almost suspicious paperwork. Elpis asks if there's a problem, but Oruto assures him there's no issue with his documents. In fact, he says that's precisely what makes this whole situation so very interesting. Elpis looks up at the A-rank adventurer, his instincts screaming that this man is trouble. The two stand off in the street, a powerful new lord sizing up a mysterious newcomer. Elpis's hand tightens into a fist as his keen sense of smell picks up a strange scent from Oruto. Oruto continues his condescending speech, asking who Elpis is supposed to be. He then offers the half-orc a sealed letter, leaving the choice to open it. With a smug grin, he adds that he'd really prefer if Elpis read it later. He then turns to Margit, casually revealing that she is his fiancée. The scene then shifts, taking us deep into the woods where their quest awaits. Perched in the trees, Margit whispers that she has finally found her target. She looks down, getting her first glimpse of the creature known as a haggis. The monsters are revealed to be vicious, badger-like beasts with glowing eyes. The pack attacks in unison, launching a volley of projectiles from the shadows. But Margit is already in motion, charging forward with her shield deflecting the assault. The haggis lunges forward, its maw a terrifying collection of needle-sharp teeth. But Margit meets its charge head-on, bracing for the brutal impact. She becomes a whirlwind of steel, deflecting every projectile with practiced ease. A flicker of strain crosses her face, but her focus remains unbroken. She plants her feet, digging into the forest floor for a solid stance. Another beast charges from the side, a blur of fur and fury. It's met with a powerful shield bash that sends it reeling backward. She flows into her next attack, a spinning kick that sends another monster flying. Even as she lands, her shield is already up, deflecting another surprise attack. Standing over the fallen creature, she declares this is the end of the line for them. The final beast is dispatched as Elpis watches from the sidelines, but a closer look reveals a flicker of genuine surprise in his eyes. His bored facade cracks, replaced by a look of utter shock. Margit stands victorious, revealing her skills come from her adventurer mother. Elpis lights his cigar, admitting this was a pleasant miscalculation. She grins, declaring her combat prowess is already near a professional level. Elpis considers her words a thoughtful expression on his face. Even his companion celebrates her complete victory over the monster pack. Margit proudly declares this a top-tier performance for any rookie, but their celebration is cut short by the arrival of a much larger problem. But Elpis simply dismisses her victory, calling her technique sloppy. With a flick of his wrist, he sends 2 projectiles flying into the trees. They intercept a hidden haggis, stopping its surprise attack dead in its tracks. His movements are a blur of speed and power that leave Margit stunned. She turns to him, flustered, insisting she had the situation handled, but he reveals he used his massive blade to block the attack she never saw coming. His tiny companion proudly declares, this is the skill of a true professional. Elpis wonders how, with this level of skill, he's still only considered a C rank. The thought makes Margit ponder the terrifying power of an A rank like Oruto. His companion, however, is just happy to celebrate their top-class victory. The forest stands silent after the brief, violent battle. With the quest complete, they move to a nearby river to process their kill. Elpis pulls out a small, sharp blade, ready for the less glamorous part of the job. He begins to expertly harvest the valuable materials from the fallen haggis. Elpis explains the creature's uses, from its valuable pelt to its antidote-rich blood. Margit proudly states she learned to make antidotes with herbs and alcohol. But Elpis notes that for a fast-acting potion, you need dangerously strong spirits. He grimaces, muttering that strong drink is the worst thing to swallow. The thought triggers a sudden painful memory, and he clutches his head. He recalls the thug's cruel words about Margit's father dying a drunkard's death. The memory hits him hard, a cold sweat breaking out on his brow. Margit offers a small, sad smile, understanding his sudden distress. Elpis's gaze hardens, the cruel words echoing in his mind. He looks down, a quiet storm of emotions brewing behind his eyes. His companion asks if he'll finish the job, but Margit eagerly volunteers. She seems pleased by this turn of events, while Elpis just looks tired of the drama. Back from the forest, Elpis stares at the letter Arudo gave him. His keen sense of smell picks up something, a scent that gives him a very bad feeling. The letter feels heavy in his hands, a choice that could change everything. Later, by the water's edge, a heavy silence hangs between the two adventurers. Margit looks away, a nervous energy about her as she prepares to speak. Elpis remains stone-faced, his patience clearly reaching its limit. He finally speaks, guessing at the painful truth she's about to reveal. Margit confirms that her father's cellar never held the whiskey he seeks. Elpis cuts her off, coldly stating that he already knew that. His harsh words hang in the heavy silence between them. His frustration finally boils over, shouting that he understands the situation. But his anger is answered by a flash of steel flying through the air. The dagger slams into a tree, inches from his face, a shocking message. And just like that, the half-orc's hardened exterior finally shatters. Elpis reveals he's known since they left the city that Margit was being followed. He explains he moved them away from the ambush point and the dagger was just a bonus. He brings the blade closer, its tip humming with a strange energy. He identifies the substance on the blade, a potent poison, not the work of some common thug. Margit, however, seems completely oblivious, proudly showing off her butchering skills. His tiny companion complains that this picnic has become far too exciting for its tastes. As they walk, the reality of the situation hangs in the air. Margit is a marked woman. Elpis decides he's not one to wait for an attack. They're going on the offensive. The unlikely duo, Elpis and Margit, now have a new, unseen enemy to deal with. Margit points ahead, suggesting they rest at an adventurer campsite after gathering firewood. Margit looks panicked, asking if he's really going to leave her alone. Elpis lets out a weary sigh, confirming he's not abandoning her. Her fear melts away, replaced by a wave of tearful relief. He grumbles that she has a real talent for getting on his nerves, but his words are a cover for a new dangerous plan taking shape. With a grim look, Elpis prepares to set his trap. He decides they'll split up, using Margit as bait to draw out their pursuers. His plan is simple. If the assassin is reckless, he'll take them out directly. But if their enemy is cautious, they'll regroup and take the long way home. Either way, he's confident he can track them by scent and finish the job. Elpis stands his ground as the forest itself seems to come alive with hostile energy. He notes the sudden spike in killing intent, directed right at him. The ground trembles and vines lash out, a clear sign the trap has been sprung. And in that moment, Elpis understands their enemy's true goal. The assassin wasn't targeting Margit, the vulnerable noblewoman. With a volley of projectiles screaming towards him, he realizes he was the target all along. But he meets the assault with a blur of motion, his massive blade a shield of steel. The ricocheting projectiles slam into the earth around him, their magic spent. Elpis smirks, recognizing the long-range magic as a textbook move against orcs. From the shadows, a hidden eye twitches, its owner clearly surprised by his survival. The assassin finally reveals themselves, a being of pure shadow and malice. Elpis glares back, completely unimpressed by the dramatic entrance. The cloaked figure seems surprised by the sheer size of its target. Dark energy swirls around the assassin, a sign of potent, dangerous magic. But Elpis notes their height is roughly the same as his own, and more importantly, his keen sense of smell picks up a familiar scent. He braces himself, ready to close the distance and end this fight quickly. Reaching into his coat, he retrieves a small hidden weapon. It's the poisoned dagger from before, a perfect tool for a little payback. With a vicious grin, he launches the blade right back at its owner. The poisoned blade soars through the forest, a silver streak of vengeance. The cloaked figure stands unmoving, a silent silhouette against the trees. But the dagger shatters on impact, splintering against something that isn't flesh. Elpis smirks, his suspicions confirmed in an instant. He knew from the scent that this was no living being. The assassin was nothing more than a wooden dummy wrapped in a cheap cloak. Elpis scoffs at the decoy, clearly insulted by the amateurish trap. But the real attack begins. As magical projectiles rain down from all sides, he becomes a blur of motion, his blade deflecting the volley with contemptuous ease. And from the shadows, the true assassin finally closes in for the kill. The hidden assassin is left stunned, their plan clearly not going as expected. They can't believe their magic was shattered by sheer brute strength alone. Their mana is draining fast, forcing them to consider a recovery potion. Any normal orc would have fallen by now, but Elpis is something else entirely. Elpis realizes this is no ordinary mage. Their ability to hide is far too skilled. The assassin unleashes a new attack, a storm of ricocheting crystal shards. The real threat appears right beside him, a woman in a maid's uniform, because of course it is. The sudden proximity of the attack catches even the half-orc off guard. He grits his teeth as the force of the blow finally connects. A spray of dark blood hits the forest floor, a sign that someone has been wounded. The maid assassin explodes from the shadows in a flurry of acrobatic violence. Her face contorts with rage as she demands the pig return her young mistress. Elpis spits blood, realizing he's facing a rare form of shadow-based magic. The attack came from within his own shadow, a perfect and deadly ambush. Wiping his chin, he grudgingly admits it's been a while since he was hit so cleanly. But her only reply is a venomous insult, calling him a half-blood abomination. The force of the blow sends Elpis to one knee, the battle suddenly turning against him. He adjusts his glasses, catching a glimpse of his companion against the full moon. But from the trees a new figure emerges, complaining that his maid jumped the gun. With a smug grin, the man challenges Elpis by name, ready to see what he's made of. The smug newcomer watches as his maid leaps into action, closing the distance in an instant. She launches a vicious kick, the art style suddenly very interested in her combat form. But Elpis just glares back, his expression a mixture of annoyance and grim focus. With a furious cry, the maid brings her leg down in a powerful axe kick. But the blow is stopped cold, meeting the unmovable wall of Elpis's forearm. She lands, vowing to kill this pig before he can lay a hand on her mistress. Elpis smirks, noting her switch to physical combat and daring her to bring it on. She becomes a whirlwind of blades and shadows, attacking from all sides at once. But Elpis simply braces himself, meeting her flurry with a single, powerful block. The force of the impact sends the assassin flying, spitting blood from the blow. The maid skids across the forest floor, thrown back by his immense power. But she's already twisting in the air, launching herself back into the fray. With a furious snarl, she vows to break every bone in his body. She lands in a crouch, coiling for her next devastating move. Elpis just looks down, muttering about how troublesome this maid is. She flies at him again, demanding he release her mistress from his influence. But his eyes catch a glint of movement, a flicker of something unexpected. A sharp pain registers as a poisoned dart embeds itself in his massive arm. He glances down at the projectile, a small but deadly-looking needle. The realization hits him. It's a poisoned blade, and it's already in his system. The maid lands in a crouch, declaring she's created the opening she needs. From the shadows, she produces a strange rifle-like weapon. With a short chant, she begins to load the magical firearm. It's a glass magic catalyst, a high-tech solution for a low-tech problem. Her bloodied hand grips the weapon, her resolve completely unshaken. Magical runes swirl as she charges the device with immense power. With her preparations complete, she takes aim, shield at the ready. Her eyes burn with fury as she unleashes her shattering bullet. From his perch, the smug newcomer watches the forest erupt in a massive explosion. A flicker of surprise crosses his face. He admits Elpis is tougher than he looks. The assassin is revealed, now Nahatgal, a former thief turned loyal maid. Her master taunts Elpis, claiming his B-rank power is nothing special. Nio unleashes another volley of magic, forcing Elpis on the defensive, but the prolonged fight is taking its toll, and she reaches for a potion. She quickly uncorks the vial, desperate to replenish her dwindling mana. Without hesitation, she downs the recovery potion to get back in the fight. Meanwhile, Elpis's companion has a potion of its own, a handy antidote. Now cured, the tiny creature spins into action, tired of being a spectator. Nio is suddenly struck, her arm shattering from an unseen attack. Elsewhere, Margit walks alone as two magical staves are discarded behind her. The two combatants now face each other across a massive, fallen tree. Elpis looks back, suggesting it's about time they ended this little charade. But now can only clutch her chest, the recovery potion hitting her system hard. An explanation reveals the potion's secret. It's also a dangerously potent alcohol. Elpis notes that even seasoned adventurers know to only ever drink one of those. Her master realizes she's on her second dose, a fatal miscalculation in this fight. The potent brew takes hold, and the deadly assassin begins to lose her balance. Her face flushes as the world starts to spin, her combat focus completely gone. The proud warrior is reduced to a helpless, teary-eyed mess. Looks like someone can't hold their liquor. Elpis stands completely unfazed, noting that her poison and magic barely left a scratch. Nio realizes the power gap is too vast. This half-blood is a true monster. A flicker of something inhuman shines in Elpis's reptilian eye. He growls that he has no intention of leaving Margit in her care. He gestures to the crystal shards, the remnants of her failed assault. Elpis repeats her name, now, his tone leaving no room for argument. He dismisses her magic as nothing more than cheap parlor tricks. But now is too far gone, drunkenly trying to remember who he is. Her eyes widen in shock as a new power fills the air. His companion easily dispels the last of her lingering shadow magic, and from the darkness, Elpis summons two massive demonic claws. Elpis reveals he used the fallen tree as part of his own devious trap. He explains he'd already prepared to disarm her so-called shattering bullet. Now is thrown back, wondering if her own magic is about to self-destruct. In her daze, she can only whisper the name of the mistress she failed to protect. With a grunt of annoyance, Elpis grips the hilt of his massive blade. He unleashes a torrent of dark energy, shattering her remaining projectiles. The intricate crystal shards are no match for his raw, demonic power. He calls upon a devastating ability, Orcus, the Grand Duke of Sin. A colossal pillar of dark energy erupts, a declaration of his true strength. Miles away, Margit looks up, completely stunned by the unexpected light show. Her hair stands on end as she wonders if that was a lightning strike. Her eyes are wide with disbelief, struggling to process the scale of the event. The source of the light is revealed, a massive crater perfectly carved out of the forest. In the center of the devastation stands Elpis, his weapon crackling with residual energy. He holds the unconscious Now in his arms, casually asking if she's still alive. His weapon has transformed, now a monstrous war mace that commands the very storms. Nio awakens in his arms, flustered and confused, asking why he would save her. Elpis just looks down, asking if she's the maid who serves Margit. He figures she acted alone out of loyalty, not wanting a half-blood near her mistress. With a dismissive smirk, he tells her not to worry. For him, this kind of trouble is just business as usual. Nio is left completely flustered, a deep blush spreading across her face. Her expression shifts to one of shame and confusion, her pride utterly shattered. From the trees, the smug newcomer applauds, a slow, deliberate clap. He admits that Elpis's single strike was far more impressive than he'd anticipated. Elpis glares up at the man, his patience for uninvited guests completely gone. The man, Oruto, finally reveals himself, floating down with an arrogant smirk. The two powerful adventurers lock eyes, a silent challenge passing between them. Oruto asks Elpis's companion if it was responsible for Nao's defeat, but he cuts the conversation short by stomping on the tiny creature. Apparently, he's not a fan of small talk. From the edge of the massive crater, Margit screams Oruto's name in a panic. Elpis's face contorts in a silent snarl, his fury finally ignited. His tiny companion is freed, looking utterly bewildered by the sudden assault. Oruto looks down, casually acknowledging the creature he just tried to crush. But Margit erupts in a furious scream, her voice echoing through the crater. She roars at Oruto, demanding he get away from her new party members. The new lord simply turns, completely unfazed by her protective rage. Elpis is left holding the unconscious maid, looking deeply annoyed by this family reunion. The story then reveals just what Oruto means to the young noblewoman. Their history began long ago, when he was just a boy from a royal family, a man who willingly cast aside his claim to the throne to become an adventurer. But now he's the man who stole her father's honor and fortune. She lands with a thud, kicking up a cloud of dust and debris. Seeing Elpis and Nao injured, Margit's mind snaps into focus. Her eyes narrow, correctly identifying Oruto as the source of the danger. With a burst of speed, she closes the distance between them. The story reveals just what Margit truly means to Oruto. When they first met, he saw a spoiled noble who resembled her adventurer mother. After her mother's death, she agreed to a political marriage to support her father. But now, in the present, he barely even gives her a second glance. With a furious cry, she charges forward, ready to confront her so-called fiancé. She unleashes a furious strike, aiming to cut down the man who ruined her life. but her blade stops dead, her attack completely nullified before it can connect. Her sword is swallowed by a swirling vortex of water that surrounds Arudo. He stands completely untouched, as if simply brushing away a minor annoyance. From the sidelines, Now can only call out to her mistress in a panic. She realizes this isn't just a shield. It's a form of spatial magic she's never seen. Elpis, however, seems to recognize the technique, a grim look on his face. It's a legendary form of absolute defense, turning the concept of water into a barrier, a technique known as the Castle of the Quiet Lake because villains love dramatic names. This is an ultimate art, a level of magic even elven masters deem impossible for adventurers. Margit stands her ground, facing down the two powerful men in the crater. But she knows the truth. The gap in power between her and Arudo is just too vast. Arudo watches her, his expression one of complete, unbothered confidence. Elpis explains the terrifying nature of his magic, a defense made of literal tons of water. Arudo's eyes gleam with the arrogance of a man who has never known defeat. He turns his attention to Elpis, asking if the Half-Orc has what it takes to break his shield. He even taunts him, suggesting that his earlier lightning strike might just do the trick. The two men lock eyes, the tension between them thick enough to cut with a blade. But Elpis offers a baffling response, admitting he doesn't actually hate the man. The smug lord is left completely speechless, his condescending smirk finally wiped from his face. Arudo's eye narrows, intrigued by the Half-Orc's bizarre choice of words. Elpis's gaze is just as intense, admitting he's never met anyone quite like Arudo. He clarifies that while they may be rivals, he doesn't see the new lord as an enemy. The smug lord just smirks, clearly enjoying this strange verbal dance. But Elpis cuts him off, insisting his words are not sarcasm but a simple truth. Arudo turns away, declaring that for now, Elpis is simply Margit's adversary. The new lord seems completely baffled by the Half-Orc's strange logic. But Elpis's eyes flash with anger, warning Arudo not to underestimate their leader. That single comment is enough to shatter Arudo's calm, and he explodes into motion. He unleashes a devastating strike, the force of the blow shaking the very air. The blow connects, sending Margit flying back across the crater floor. Arudo's expression is cold, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. Margit's world spins, the force of the blow rattling her to her very core. But she roars back, declaring she's an adventurer who will one day surpass him. With a furious cry, she charges back into the fray, refusing to back down. Elpis watches on, his expression unreadable but clearly intrigued by her fire. Nio erupts in a cheer, realizing her mistress just broke through his absolute defense. Arudo is stunned as the narration explains the world's 3 types of magic. The first is general magic, the classic 4 elements channeled through glass. The second is unique magic, an innate power that can't be learned or taught. This power is wielded as naturally as breathing, requiring no chance or catalysts. And the third type is magic tools, items imbued with power, like Elpis's monstrous weapon. The battlefield is set, with Margit charging headfirst into the fray. Arudo's confident expression shatters, a flicker of disbelief in his eyes. Elpis realizes the truth. The absolute defense requires absolute focus, and by drawing Arudo's attention, he created a sliver of an opening for Margit. Arudo's gaze softens, admitting it's been a long time since he's seen that fire in her. But his moment of reflection is cut short as Margit's attack connects. Suddenly, a masked figure intercepts her, catching the exhausted noblewoman. The newcomer's eye glares at Arudo, declaring she won't forgive him for hurting her friends. Looks like the party just got a little bigger. The newcomer's eye narrows, a bead of sweat tracing their temple. Arudo scoffs from a distance, claiming that such a weak attack is hardly a threat. The masked warrior intercepts Arudo, moving with a speed that defies their size. The crater becomes a battlefield as the newcomer engages the A-rank adventurer directly. They stand between Margit and Arudo, a silent, unmovable guardian. The warrior turns back, their gaze falling on the wounded Elpis. The mask comes off, revealing a young woman who asks if Margit is all right. But her concern quickly hardens into defiance, declaring this is nothing she can't handle. She now stands beside Margit, ready to face down the new Lord of Landless. Elpis watches with a weary smirk, admitting she might be overdoing it just a little. Elpis is surprised at himself, wondering why he's taking up arms for others. But as he glares ahead, he admits that this feeling isn't entirely unwelcome. Arudo mocks the masked newcomer, sarcastically commenting on her loyalty. A crack spiders across her mask, a sign of the immense pressure she's under. The mask shatters completely, revealing a horned woman with a stunned expression. Tears well in her eyes as she asks him not to comment on her height. But Margit recognizes her, shouting out the name of her unique eyes, Mazari. The narration reveals she's a half-dwarf, which explains her unusual stature. The half-dwarf warrior notes that another adventurer shares her unique eyes, and with a gesture, she prepares to unleash her own formidable power. The narration reveals the name of Elpis' weapon, Orcus, the Grand Duke of Sin, and Mazari wields its counterpart, Gueria, the Executioner Princess. The two warriors face off, their legendary weapons ready for a true test of strength. Elpis can't believe it, wondering if this half-dwarf really wants to pick a fight with him, but Mazari's gaze is just as cold, clearly not a fan of lecturing pigs. With a roar, they unleash the full power of their ancestral magic tools. A storm of lightning and darkness collides, shaking the very foundations of the crater. Nayo shields Margit from the blast, calling out her mistress's name in a panic. The maid can only stare in awe, completely stunned by the incredible power on display. Margit is left speechless, her eyes wide with the realization of what her new allies can do. But Aruto stands between them, casually holding the two forces at bay. The three powerhouses are locked in a tense stalemate across the crater floor. Aruto smirks at Elpis, claiming his own party members are just too fond of him. The half-dwarf warrior snaps at her leader, insisting that Elpis is more than capable. But Aruto's gaze hardens, his slitted pupil a silent command to stand down. Elpis' own eye narrows, questioning if this man is truly serious. As Margit reaches out from the ground, Elpis can only look on in silent frustration. The narration introduces the half-dwarf as Shika, a warrior who once annihilated a bandit group alone, and Elpis, the half-orc who can go toe-to-toe with an A-rank powerhouse like her. Looks like our boy is moving up in the world. Margit looks on, her expression hardening with a new unspoken resolve. Margit's eyes widen, realizing she's surrounded by absolute monsters. Aruto mockingly notes how her companions seem to adore their new leader. Her fury boils over as she screams his name, her patience finally gone. The narration confirms this wasn't a fluke. She's reached a new height of power. Aruto's gaze remains steady, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. Margit declares the age of helpless princesses is over. She'll stand as an equal. Elpis can only stare, admitting that she's already proving her point. The three powerhouses stand across the crater, a silent challenge in the air. He glances back at Margit, who meets his gaze with unwavering resolve. And for a moment, the hardened half-orc is left completely speechless. She roars that he was the one who called her a comrade, who acknowledged her strength. And for the first time, she calls him by his name, a question in her voice. Aruto places a hand on Elpis' shoulder, telling him not to get too worked up. He then reminds Elpis of the letter he was given before leaving the city. The rest of the party can only watch, caught in the middle of this standoff. Aruto's smug expression suggests he's enjoying every second of this chaos. He explains that the letter is likely an invitation to a much higher stage, a challenge from one powerhouse to another, delivered with a condescending grin. Margit can only look on, completely lost in this high-level power play. But as Elpis finally opens the letter, he finds it's completely blank. Guess Aruto's a fan of minimalist design. Margit explodes in fury, demanding to know if he's making a fool of them. But Aruto just smirks, explaining that it's a letter one can't simply read. Elpis glares at the blank page, his frustration growing with every passing second. But then, his expression shifts, a sudden understanding dawning on his face. He realizes the message isn't in words, but in the paper's distinct scent. The unmistakable aroma of a very specific, very rare brand of whiskey. He looks up at Aruto, admitting the scent is almost exactly what he's been searching for. The new lord's grin widens, enjoying the half-orc's stunned reaction. The name of the legendary brand echoes in his mind, the Blessed Ballad, a miracle water, a blend of the world's 7 most legendary liquors. So, a really expensive cocktail. Aruto reveals the legendary drink's true name with a triumphant grin. Elpis glares back, demanding to know just how much this man truly knows. The new lord simply states that they are both searching for the very same thing. Elpis roars that this isn't just a drink, it's a memory of his family and friends. But Aruto declares the miracle liquor will be his, and his alone. The two sides stand opposed, the lines of this new conflict clearly drawn. Aruto issues a challenge, daring Elpis to rise to his level. His eyes burn with the confidence of a man who has never known defeat. But Elpis meets his gaze, a silent promise of the battle to come. A new quest has begun, a race to claim the divine liquor, and it's going to be a messy one. Aruto issues his final challenge, a promise to meet Elpis at the very top. Back at the guild, the quest to hunt the haggis is officially declared complete. A new elven receptionist calmly processes their successful mission report. And for her efforts, Margit is officially promoted to the illustrious D rank. With the day's chaos behind them, the newly formed party raises a celebratory toast. The unlikely group settles in for a well-deserved meal and a moment of peace. The main course is revealed, a heaping platter of freshly fried haggis. Elpis's companion raves about the ale, while Nao confirms the fresh meat was the right call. Margit enjoys her drink, her earlier humiliation completely forgotten for now. But for Shika, the whiskey is more than a drink. It's a memory of a cherished friend. Nao reveals that Orudo's knowledge comes from a mysterious otherworlder. Shika just laughs, clearly enjoying the chaos of their new party dynamic. But Elpis dismisses the idea, stating that such things are not important to him. He explains that his quest is for a dear friend who once saved his life. His only wish is to pour that legendary whiskey on his fallen friend's grave. The table falls silent, his companions finally understanding his true motivation. Margit reflects on her own quest, to honor her father's will by becoming an adventurer. She smiles, genuinely touched that he would share something so personal with them. Elpis is left flustered, clearly not equipped to handle genuine emotional connection. With new resolve, Margit declares they will beat Orudo to the legendary whiskey. Elpis agrees, stating that her success is now tied to his own quest. His tiny companion celebrates their new camaraderie, much to Elpis's chagrin. But Margit points out a small problem. There are conditions for forming a party. Elpis recalls the guild's rules. They need at least 2 C-rank members. So Margit declares their new goal, get her promoted and recruit more allies. The others get excited, imagining a new mage blasting foes from the back line. Elpis grumbles that they need a magic user, and they just happen to know one. The classic strategy, a strong front line protecting a powerful spellcaster. Margit is stunned by this revelation. Guess charge forward isn't the only strategy. The narration explains that true adventurers must be both self-sufficient and team players. But Elpis's expression hardens, flatly rejecting the very idea of it. Margit is left completely baffled, asking why he's so against the strategy. He explains that he refuses to accept a plan that anticipates a comrade's death. The harsh reality of his words leaves the young noblewoman utterly speechless. For a true adventurer, he explains, every choice is a matter of life and death. Shika backs him up, revealing the grim statistics of their chosen profession. Elpis adds that of his own peers, only one other adventurer is still active. Margit's expression sours, clearly not a fan of this brutal reality check. Even Nio objects, insisting her mistress is not yet ready for such risks. But Margit's resolve hardens, remembering her duty to rebuild her family's name. Margit's hands clench, her resolve unshaken by their grim warnings. But Nio insists she shouldn't have to team up with a half-blood at all. Margit can only look on, surprised by her maid's sudden outburst. Elpis just closes his eyes, admitting her argument has a certain cold logic. Nio continues, calling half-bloods like herself and Shika an ill omen. Elpis slams his fist down, agreeing that it's a sound, if cruel, argument. Margit turns to him, worried that Nao's words have hurt him. But he just looks away, muttering that he already knows the score. He then points, changing the subject back to their need for a mage, and his finger lands squarely on a very stunned, very prejudiced Nao. Talk about an awkward job offer, but Margit's eyes light up, thrilled by the prospect of Nao joining them. Elpis explains that Nao's agility and rare magic make her the perfect candidate. He then casually brings up her past as a thief, much to her dismay. The proud assassin can only slump over the table in utter humiliation. Elpis seems completely unbothered by her reaction, his point already made. Nio is left sweating, her carefully guarded secret now out in the open. But Elpis adds that the guild doesn't care about one's past. How very progressive of them. The maid looks up, her prejudice warring with this unexpected offer. Margit's gaze softens as she addresses her loyal, conflicted servant. She declares that together, they will restore her father's honor in this city. But Margit cuts through the tension, declaring Nao is not just a servant, but her friend. Elpis just watches the scene unfold, his expression giving absolutely nothing away. With a gentle look, Margit asks if Nao would be willing to officially become her comrade, a true member of their party. But Nao leaps onto the table, flatly declaring that it's impossible. Talk about a flair for the dramatic. The drama is interrupted by a new voice, a blonde elf claiming Nao is her property. Nao can only look down, her face a mixture of shame and frustration. Margit is left completely stunned by this sudden, bizarre claim. Elpis lets out a low growl, his patience for tavern theatrics officially gone. The man with the elf reveals himself, a merchant who reeks of pure, unadulterated greed. The elf woman smirks, noting the distinct scent of blood in the air. Elpis' eyes narrow, his instincts already sizing up the newcomers. The merchant explains his business, sponsoring adventurers for a tidy profit. He taps the table, a gesture of ownership and condescension. Elpis glares back, his patience for this kind of arrogance wearing thin. Now can only look down, caught in the middle of this humiliating display. The elf woman looks them over, demanding to know who they are. The merchant introduces himself as Kankira, his smile dripping with false sincerity, and his companion introduces herself as Sharbika, an adventurer with a wild grin. She's the leader of a C-rank party, and she's clearly got a flair for the dramatic. She gets right in his face, proudly declaring her nickname, the Orc Hunter. Elpis' eye narrows, finding this whole situation a strange coincidence. Sharbeka announces to the room that she despises orcs, a nickname she's had since she was a rookie. Margit's eyes widen, a flicker of understanding passing through them. The elf watches him light his cigar, noting the intelligence in the half-blood's eyes. The two adventurers lock gazes, a silent challenge passing between them. She leans in with a sneer, asking if he's been eating with his nose. Classy. But Elpis simply turns away, completely unfazed by her childish taunts. Margit recognizes the merchant, recalling that he used to do business with her father. Kankira complains about her father's high tariffs, celebrating the city's new freedom. Sharbeka sneers that her father's rule let merchants like Kankira get arrogant. The merchant gloats that with the old lord gone, business is finally booming, but the elf's eyes narrow, questioning his very specific choice of words. Kankira then summons Now, revealing she ran away from him that morning. Now can only look down, her face a mask of pure, crushing humiliation. Margit calls out her name, completely stunned by this sudden revelation. Elpis' expression hardens, a low growl rumbling in his chest. With a smug grin, Kankira explains the simple truth. Now is deeply in his debt. He declares that in this so-called free city, there is no freedom for debtors. Now stands in silence, her pride completely shattered by the public shaming. Margit can only stare, her voice barely a whisper as she calls Now's name. She turns to the merchant, demanding to know the exact amount of this supposed debt. Kankira's smug grin widens as he reveals the price, a staggering 10 gold coins. The number hits Margit like a physical blow, her mind struggling to process the sum. A helpful chart explains that this is an absolutely life-ruining amount of money. So, not your average bar tab. Sharbeka scoffs, noting that this isn't the kind of debt one racks up on a whim. Nao looks down, her own mind reeling, unable to understand how this happened. As the merchant's party looms over her, Margit reaches out in a panic. She demands an explanation, asking what could possibly cost so much. But Nao just hangs her head in shame, whispering that she cannot say. Nao cuts through the sentiment, declaring she is neither a friend nor a comrade. Sharbeka and Kankira watch with smug satisfaction as Nao is led away. Margit screams her name, begging her loyal maid to wait, but Nao just shouts back, telling her mistress to stay away. Margit can only watch, her eyes filling with tears of confusion. Through her own tears, Nao begs her not to follow. The merchant and his elf companion seem to be enjoying the drama a little too much. The young noblewoman is left completely stunned by the betrayal. She demands to know why, insisting her father gave Nao a generous severance. Elpis' companion recalls its own past, remembering the sting of being called a monster. The companion recalls telling another monster that their senses were one and the same. It admits that it can't truly claim to understand Elpis' unique suffering, but it knows that Elpis' nose can perceive the true feelings of others, and only he can decide if that power is a curse or a gift. Back in the present, the party looks on as their new enemies loom large. Elpis' expression darkens, muttering that he doesn't like this one bit. He can sense the deep, genuine bond between Margit and her loyal maid, and he can smell the merchant's vile methods, twisting that bond for profit. His reptilian eye narrows, his disgust hardening into cold, calculated fury. But Sharbeka just laughs, a chilling, bloodthirsty sound that fills the tavern. Elpis' eye narrows, the foul scent of this injustice finally pushing him over the edge. Sharbeka sneers that her title as Orc Hunter means she won't tolerate a half-blood's arrogance. She declares that in this moment, both the monster and the noblewoman are finished. The rest of the guild watches, content to see the outcast get put in their place. Sharbeka's eye glints, relishing her self-appointed role as the hunter of villains. But Elpis just places a hand on Margit's shoulder, suggesting they find a new venue. The elf scoffs, calling him heartless for not fighting for his so-called comrade. Margit's face contorts in a silent snarl, her fury reaching its boiling point. Sharbeka leans in close, her taunts turning into a low, menacing whisper. and from the back, now can only watch, a silent prisoner in her own drama. But Elpis just looks on, vowing that he will absolutely save her. Sharbeka scoffs, asking if the orc hunter is supposed to let him go just for defending a debtor. Shika chimes in, reminding the elf that orcs are still considered demi-humans. With a dismissive wave, Elpis turns to leave, wishing them luck with their work. He walks away without a second glance, leaving the stunned elf in his wake. The elf then turns her attention to Margit, demanding to know what she'll do. Her expression is one of pure manic glee, eager to see the noblewoman break. Nio looks back one last time, her face a mask of shame and despair. But Margit just stands in silence, her expression hidden by her hair. She then looks up, her eyes burning with cold fury, declaring she has no dogs among her comrades. The elf is left stunned, her taunts dying on her lips. But her shock quickly turns to mockery, asking if Margit was just abandoned by her maid. On the dark city street, the two groups begin to separate. Elpis and Margit are left standing alone as Nao is led away into the night. Margit takes a single, hesitant step forward, her body wanting to follow. But Elpis simply looks on, grimly acknowledging her powerful declaration. Through her tears, Margit admits this kind of cruelty is just like the backstabbing of high society. Elpis realizes this was all a setup, a challenge meant to force him into a villain's role. She confesses that until this moment, she didn't know where to direct her own anger. And with that realization, her hand clenches into a tight, determined fist. Elpis tells Margit that she's just as devoted to Nao as the maid is to her. He explains that he knows this because of her scent, a truth she can't hide. Margit teases him, admitting his charming nose sees more than just smells. Her hand tightens into a fist, her resolve solidifying into a single purpose. A single tear falls, but her eyes burn with a newfound unshakable fire. With a shared purpose, they vow to take back their comrade no matter the cost. Under the crescent moon, Sharbeka's name is called out in the night. The merchant dismisses his entourage outside a lavish estate, his business for the night concluded. On a rooftop overlooking the city, Kankira asserts his dominance over the captive maid. Nao can only stare ahead, her expression a mask of quiet, crushing despair. Nao's face is a mask of pure, unadulterated misery, but Sharbeka just looks on, a smug, condescending smirk on her face. Kankira addresses his hired muscle, with Nao standing isolated in the background. He explains the situation, focusing on the troublesome half-orc who started it all. The elf warns him not to get ahead of himself, questioning if he can handle the fallout. Her expression remains cold, completely unimpressed by the merchant's scheming. Nio can only look down, her spirit completely broken by the public humiliation. But Sharbeka just grins, declaring that the maid is now her personal prey. Kankira places his full confidence in the orc hunter, pleased with the arrangement. And with her new pet secured, Sharbeka happily skips off into the night. Sharbeka waves a cheerful goodbye as Kankira leads Nao toward his lavish estate. But the moment they're out of sight, she spits on the ground in disgust. The gesture is a clear sign of her utter contempt for the merchant. She mutters to herself that the man clearly doesn't understand the situation at all. She recalls Elpis's calm demeanor, realizing he's not one to brawl without a reason. Deciding this is all too troublesome, she resolves to do a little hunting of her own. Meanwhile, Elpis and his party arrive at the Varuna Trading Company. Inside, they explain their entire complicated predicament to the company's head. Margit, now in a sharp new uniform, declares they need money to rescue their comrade. Shika looks on, clearly a little uncomfortable with this new diplomatic approach. Elpis looks on, his expression grim as he prepares to make his case. But the woman in charge simply smiles, addressing him by name. She introduces herself as Varuna, noting that Elpis is, as always, a magnet for trouble. Margit is left completely baffled by their sudden and easy familiarity. Elpis apologizes for being a day late and for the unreasonable request he's about to make. Shika just scoffs, clearly not a fan of these formal business meetings. Margit realizes he's brought them to one of his personal business contacts. Varuna just smiles, amused by the chaos her old acquaintance has brought with him. The young noblewoman is left completely flustered by this unexpected turn of events. She finally understands that this meeting was one of the reasons Elpis came to this city. Varuna explains the inseparable bond between merchants and adventurers. She lays out the harsh economics of their profession, a constant cycle of expenses. Merchants provide the coin, and adventurers provide the steel to protect it. This, she declares, is the very essence of their new free city. Margit listens, the weight of this new reality sinking in. Elpis remains silent, his expression unreadable behind his dark glasses. But Shika has heard enough, her patience for this lecture completely gone. She stomps her foot, demanding they cut to the chase and get to the point. Margaret is left completely stunned by her comrade's sudden outburst. Varuna, however, just takes a calm sip of her tea, completely unbothered by the drama. Shika explodes, spitting insults about his half-blood heritage. She gets right in his face, accusing him of being a penniless freeloader. Elpis is completely taken aback by her sudden, aggressive outburst. Margaret can only watch, wondering what just set her off. But Shika's anger suddenly deflates, slumping over in defeat. She tells them to shut up, her rage collapsing into frustrated tears. Margaret looks on, realizing this is all because Shika is talking to Elpis. Varuna tells the young noblewoman to learn from the half-orc's example. Looks like class is in session. The merchant watches the scene with a calm, knowing gaze. Shika declares that as a D rank, she can't even protect one comrade, calling it a disgrace. She gets right in Elpis's face, her frustration finally boiling over. Margaret is left completely lost, unsure what just triggered this explosion. Varuna, however, seems to be enjoying the show, a knowing look in her eyes. Elpis calmly asks if she's still holding a grudge over losing a duel to him. Shika roars back, furious that he'd bring up a fight from years ago. He then twists the knife, asking if this is about him rejecting her party invitation. She screams that he's digging up ancient history, her face a mask of pure rage. Margaret can only stare, her jaw on the floor as this old drama comes to light. Varuna's smile widens, clearly entertained by this very personal business meeting. The entire party is now caught in the middle of this very awkward reunion. Varuna reveals that Elpis and Shika were once fellow adventurers from the same cohort. She takes a sip of tea, recalling that it's been 3 years since she first met Elpis. Margaret is left completely bewildered, asking just who these people really are. Varuna explains that while she and Kankira are both merchants, she despises his methods. Through her tears, Margaret insists that she doesn't see them as the same at all. Elpis can only look on, clearly uncomfortable with being the center of this drama. Varuna just smiles, admitting that Margaret is a rather interesting young woman. She explains that forcing someone's hand is like spreading poison through the city. But what Margaret is attempting to do, she declares, is to fight poison with poison. The young noblewoman is left completely stunned by this harsh assessment. Elpis's expression hardens, a silent declaration of his resolve. Margaret meets that resolve with her own unwavering conviction, a conviction that borders on pure, unadulterated madness. Varuna lays out the terms. They must prove they're worth her investment. She calls them nothing more than moldy trophies, relics of a forgotten time. The harsh words seem to land, leaving Margaret in silent contemplation. Even Elpis is taken aback by the merchant's brutal honesty. Varuna warns him not to coddle the young noblewoman. She declares that the one who must answer now is Margaret herself. Varuna challenges her directly, proves she has what it takes to be a leader. Margaret's eyes narrow, her resolve hardening under Varuna's intense scrutiny. She begins her answer, her voice a quiet but steady declaration of who she is. She recalls a time she made a fool of herself in front of royalty. Back then, she was just a girl, forced into a political marriage to save her family. But that girl is gone, and in her place stands a proud adventurer. Shika looks on, her earlier fire now just a weary ember. Elpis watches in silence, his expression giving absolutely nothing away. Varuna's reflection glints in her blade, a flicker of interest in her eyes. The scene then cuts to a dark, opulent bedroom, a figure hidden in the shadows. A skeletal being rises from the bed, a chilling new player entering the game. Nao is bound and helpless, her captor declaring that it's time for her punishment. A memory echoes, a lesson about never stealing from others. It was a harsh truth learned over a simple loaf of bread. Those words, spoken so long ago, still haunt her, a cruel reminder that has never truly faded from her memory. Her story began in a land ravaged by noble corruption and endless war. She was just a child then, alone and abandoned amidst the city's ruins. But a hand reached out, offering a chance at a different life. She looked up, her eyes filled with a desperate, flickering hope. The man was a righteous bandit, and he took her in as his adopted daughter. Her magical talent was discovered, and she became a key fighter for the bandit crew. As they stole from corrupt nobles, their numbers and influence began to grow. But one day she came across a starving boy, alone on the city streets. She offered him a loaf of bread, completely unaware of the danger lurking nearby. With genuine concern, she simply asks if he's had anything to eat. But the boy's expression hardens, his pride refusing her simple act of kindness. In a flash of magic, he violently rejects her offer, sending the bread flying. He screams at her, refusing to accept food that was stolen from other people. Through his tears, he questions the very idea of a righteous bandit. Nio is left completely baffled, believing they were no different from the nobles they stole from. She recalls how the bandit crew grew, their righteous looting becoming reckless. Looking back, she realizes she never understood the great cause her father preached. She had no pride, no shame, no malice, she was simply surviving. Like a stray dog eating scraps, she lived a foolish, empty existence. And that foolishness led to a brutal, undignified end for her leader. The one who brought that end was a familiar face, the half-dwarf Mazari. Their entire righteous bandit crew was annihilated by a single half-blood. Mazari looks down at the lone survivor, asking if she wants to join her comrades. You know, as one does after a massacre. The young now can only tremble, her world completely and utterly shattered. Her only response is a pathetic whimper, the sound of a broken child. She heard a pathetic whimper nearby, realizing it was her own voice. Broken and defeated, she fled from the east, leaving the battlefield behind. Her desperate flight continued through the bustling city streets. She finally collapsed in the woods, her will to live completely exhausted, and by the time she could even begin to process her past mistakes, she met the one person who would change her life, the young lady, Margit. She could only ask why a noble would ever bother to help someone like her. The question seemed to catch the young noble completely by surprise. Nao's eyes filled with tears, unable to comprehend this simple act of kindness. Margit simply explained that those who have must share, a novel concept for a noble. Nao's eye reflects a world of pain she thought she'd left behind. But Margit explains that people will always try to take what is precious. The simple, profound kindness leaves the former bandit completely broken. And so, the young noble introduces her new friend to her father, the Lord. The old Lord's expression is weary, perhaps seeing another burden to carry. Nao became a maid, learning the truth about the so-called vicious noble. For now, Margit and her father became the light that saved her from the dark, and in return she became their shadow, the true embodiment of their noble spirit. But the memory of that boy's words still echoes in her mind, a memory that seems to connect to the elf Sharuka in some unexpected way. Nao's eyes burn with resolve. She vows to never repeat her past mistakes. Her thoughts echo Margit's fierce declaration from moments before. But back in the present, she's pinned to the floor completely at the merchant's mercy. A glass of dark liquid is poured, a symbol of her complete humiliation. Konkira sneers, mocking her for staining his fine bed with her blood. He presses down hard, a cruel display of his absolute dominance. He then produces a small vial, preparing to force its contents on her. Through the pain, her expression remains unbroken, a flicker of defiance in her eyes. Her gaze hardens, her will refusing to be shattered by this torment. She realizes with confusion that he's holding a recovery potion. The merchant muses that after a long career, he now desires things money can't buy, but now knows exactly what those things are: dignity, loyalty, faith, and freedom. For some, their inner light is a curse they are destined to bear. He tells her to prove her submission so he can buy her back and make her his servant. But through the pain, her defiant gaze remains completely unbroken. He offers the potion again, a cruel parody of kindness. With a final burst of strength, she smacks the vial from his hand, shattering it. She glares, refusing to accept any charity from a man like him. Her defiance only seems to amuse the merchant, his smirk never wavering. She vows that if her body can buy back her lady's pride, it's a price she'll gladly pay. Kankira's smug expression shows he's enjoying every moment of this. His eyes narrow, filled with a cold, condescending contempt. He erupts in fury, screaming that a mere maid has no right to defy him, but Nao braces herself, refusing to break under his violent rage. Through her tears, she accepts this as a just punishment for her past sins, a penance for the broken bandit she once was, a loser who deserves this fate. The merchant forces her down, a final cruel act of absolute dominance. But even now, she knows the truth of what she really wanted. She never wanted to say goodbye to the life she'd found with her friends. She admits she never wanted Margit to be an adventurer, afraid of being left behind. Elpis reflects on the half-orc's overwhelming power, a strength he could never hope to counter. But despite that strength, Elvis acknowledged him, forcing Elpis to respect the man he once saw as a rival. And in that moment, Elpis finally admits the truth to himself. The memory of that brutal punch suddenly makes everything crystal clear. He sees the three of them, the half-orc, the noble, and the maid. And he realizes all he ever truly wanted was to go on an adventure with them. The impact of that blow wasn't just physical, it was an awakening. A single quiet sound of realization escapes his lips. He finally understands his own heart, his own hidden desire. A silent resolve forms, a new path now laid bare before him. Margit's words echo in his mind. People will always try to take what is precious. And with a single determined step, the retainer makes his choice. A silent plea for help echoes from a past he can no longer ignore. The pig-faced retainer lets out a furious roar, his decision finally made. He smashes through the wall, a one-man wrecking crew on a rescue mission. Kankira sneers about the vulgar scent, glad to have finally found his place. But his monologue is cut short as the retainer steps into the room. Now looks up through her tears, seeing the friend who came back for her. Margit's voice rings out, a furious vow to reclaim her companion. The merchant's smug confidence shatters, replaced by cold, dawning fear. She offers her family's silver dagger, a final desperate piece of collateral. Sharuka scoffs, mocking the young noble for always being one step behind. She's clearly annoyed that the retainer chose Margit's side over hers. A hand clenches, a silent promise of the fight that is about to begin. The retainer accepts her resolve, his loyalty to Margit now absolute. The two stand united, a small but determined force against the corrupt merchant. Now can only call out her lady's name, her hope suddenly rekindled. Kankira's face twists in fury, demanding to know what they think they're doing. But Sharuka just watches on, completely unfazed by their dramatic entrance. Seeing her friend's pain, Margit's mind is flooded with the worst possible images. Her earlier fury instantly transforms into a cold, black rage. She points forward, her shock turning to fury as she calls out to her leader. Even Sharuka seems taken aback, calling out the retainer's name in confusion. But Elpis simply turns his back, walking away from the confrontation. He declares that if they're just going to act on emotion, he's leaving the party. Margit is left completely lost, questioning what she's supposed to do now. He stops her, telling her not to let Nao's sacrifice be in vain. The retainer stands firm, his decision seemingly made. With a quiet resolve, she offers her thanks to the pig-faced retainer. Her eyes snap open, a new and dangerous fire burning within them. Kankira looks up from the floor, completely bewildered by his two new visitors. A heavy bag of coins slams directly into the merchant's face. The force sends him sprawling across the floor as Sharuka watches in shock. The elf sneers, telling him to take the money he so clearly worships. Kankira is left a whimpering, pathetic mess on the cold, hard ground. He clutches the bag, his greed warring with his utter humiliation. He scoffs, questioning if they really think they can pay Nao's 10 gold debt. But the bag opens to reveal a fortune, a staggering 20 gold coins. The merchant is speechless. This is a sum even he can't easily ignore. Sharuka is just as stunned, wondering how they raised this capital so fast. The retainer gently lifts the injured Nao, asking if she's all right. He admits it's a shame she's not in Margit's arms, noting tonight is a crucial moment. Nao can't believe she's been saved twice by a man she once called a pig bastard. But her inner thoughts betray her, a truth she can't bring herself to say aloud. The retainer's expression is grim, as if he can sense her unspoken words. The truth is, all she ever wanted was to go on an adventure with the three of them. The sudden shared realization leaves her completely stunned. He turns to her, asking why she thinks he came all this way to save her. He tells her that with them, her dream is finally possible. Her eyes widen, realizing he's promising they can do this as many times as it takes. The retainer's gaze is filled with a quiet, unwavering resolve. A single tear escapes Nao's eye, a silent testament to her overwhelming relief. He holds her steady, a silent promise that she is finally safe. But Kankira erupts in fury, screaming that they can't just buy their way out of this. Sharuka just looks on, completely bored by this pathetic display. The merchant declares that in his house he decides what is bought and sold. The elf's cold gaze watches the scene, her own motive still a mystery. He loses his composure completely, screaming that he is the one in control here. At his command, two heavily armored enforcers step from the shadows. Sharuka identifies the guards, her expression shifting to one of mild annoyance. The armored guards stand ready, a clear and immediate threat to our heroes. Nao shouts in alarm, recognizing them as members of Sharuka's own party. But in a flash of motion, something cuts through the tense standoff. The sudden move leaves even the manic elf Sharuka completely stunned. Elpis stands between them armed with a loaf of French bread, because of course he is. The two guards are sent reeling, completely baffled by this culinary assault. One of them screams in disbelief, questioning how this man is a professional orc hunter. Nao can only blush, completely flustered by his unexpected display of power. Sharuka is just as shocked, wondering how he broke through her guard's full-plate armor. But Elpis just turns to Margit, coolly asking why she looks so surprised. Elpis points, accusing Shiruka of using a technique he recognizes all too well. The elf can only stare back, her composure finally cracking under his gaze. A gasp of realization escapes her lips as the memory suddenly hits her. A flashback reveals a brutal training session, with Shiruka landing a devastating blow. He recalls learning a powerful technique, the ruinous Echo Strike, a move that Shiruka now uses with practiced vicious ease. A woman with glasses explains the technique's secret, a hollow mace that reflects impact internally. He remembers it as a super high-level martial art, far beyond a rookie's skill. The weapon itself is a masterpiece, a dwarven-forged mace known as the Tulip. She explains it's the perfect weapon for a new adventurer, light, cheap, and brutally effective. The memory reveals the woman's lesson. A simple weapon couldn't possibly harm Aruto. Elpis grumbles, finally understanding the point of her lecture. He recalls how Margit's attack bypassed Aruto's defense by targeting the moisture within his body. It was a move that even Aruto found impressive, especially from a bare-handed rookie. He remembers Aruto's words, acknowledging Elpis as a worthy rival. The intense memory is cut short by a sudden, rather undignified sneeze. But back in the present, Kankira refuses to admit defeat, his arrogance unbroken. He glares at Margit, spitting her name and title like a curse. But Margit meets his gaze with a fury that could melt steel. He reveals a small, intricate box, promising to make her taste true humiliation. He activates a magic tool, unleashing the power of the brush's box. The box summons a nightmarish creature, the evil dragon Ashura Hat. But the elf Shiruka is already on it, meeting the beast head-on. Her fist connects with devastating force, a blur of raw power. She unleashes a powerful technique, the destructive sound wave strike. The summoned beast is dispatched in a single devastating blow. Nao looks on with a cheerful smile, clearly a fan of the violence. Elpis, on the other hand, looks completely unimpressed. Kankira is left speechless, his trump card swatted away mid-summon. Shiruka just smirks, mocking the pathetic display of cowardice. Shiruka glares, demanding to know if he's forgotten who she is. Elpis just smirks, calling them a perfect match, a half-orc and the city's most hated outcast. His thoughts label Margit as the vicious young lady, a title she's clearly earned. But Margit has had enough, telling Elpis their business is finished and to never show his face again. The scene shifts to a quiet room, far from the chaos of the merchant's office. Inside, Shiruka is in the middle of a rather enthusiastic private celebration. Her companion can only call out her name as she lets out a manic laugh. He praises her strength, noting that adventurers are formidable even after dark. We learn her story was told in a minstrel's song, a tale of revenge for a sister slain by orcs. A quiet moment of reflection on her so-called righteous orc hunt. Her manic glee is almost predatory as she leans over her companion. The story then shifts, a new chapter in this chaotic tale beginning. Shiruka mockingly reveals that even her own childhood friend was an orc. For her, hunting orcs is a profitable business of so-called justice. The sheer absurdity of it all brings tears of disbelief to someone's eyes. Elsewhere, the merchant Kankira sits in quiet, contemplative silence. Margit is left completely bewildered, questioning the turn of events. A single step marks a new morning, and a desperate search for answers. Others can only stare at the destruction left in the orc hunter's wake. We learn Varuna's company is a key ally to the city's defense forces. The elf Shiruka can only stare back, completely baffled by this new line of questioning. It's revealed that the merchant Kankira is suspected of illegal drug trafficking. The news hits Shiruka like a ton of bricks, her smug demeanor completely gone. The unseen interrogator presses on, demanding she tell them everything she knows. Her reaction is a stark contrast to the calm demeanor of her questioner. She flails about, a frantic dance of pure, unadulterated denial. Her scream of disbelief echoes out from the Varuna Trading Company headquarters. But the scene shifts to a quiet cottage, far from the city's corruption. Here, a peaceful picnic is underway, the meal finally ready to be served. The dish is a medicinal porridge, a gentle remedy for a world full of violence. Margit and Nao are practically vibrating with excitement over the meal's aroma. Elpis proudly presents the finished dish, a spoonful ready for the tasting. He adds the final touch, shaving a rare and expensive truffle over the porridge. It turns out Elpis has a knack for foraging, a skill he picked up while hunting. With the prep work done, he declares it's finally time to eat. The three companions share a rare moment of peace, united by a good meal. And as they eat, Nao finally begins to open up about her past. She recounts her entire history, the war, the bandits, and her life before Margit. Through her tears, she apologizes for keeping these secrets for so long. Elpis just keeps eating, seemingly unfazed by this heartfelt confession. A man's gotta eat, I guess. Margit thanks Now for finally sharing the painful story of her past. But with a chibi grin, Margit admits she already knew the whole story. Turns out, a drunk Now had already spilled the beans when she first arrived. She'd apparently told the same sob story over and over again. Classic. Elpis then asks the one question that remains, the true reason for her debt. Now reveals she went into debt trying to buy back a dress Margit's mother left her. Elpis realizes it was the same dress Margit wore the day they first met. Nao tearfully admits she acted rashly, unable to bear seeing her lady without it. The revelation leaves Margit completely flustered and at a loss for words. She tackles her loyal maid in a fierce, emotional hug, their bond stronger than ever. Nao thanks her lady for protecting the pride of the Marguerite family name. But she sneaks a quick, meaningful glance over at their other companion. The pig-faced retainer, Elpis, is left completely baffled by the sudden attention. He lets out a small, frustrated grunt, clearly not a fan of these emotional moments. Nao then turns to him, offering a tearful and heartfelt thanks for the rescue. Elvis just grunts in acknowledgement, as if saving people is just another Tuesday. Margit realizes that Oruto didn't just seize some of their assets, he took everything. Elpis notes that those who hunt for money and inheritance have a certain scent. Margit puts it all together. Oruto needed to secure her father's entire fortune. Now realizes the true lengths their new enemy would go to for that prize. The next chapter of their quest begins centered on the Blessed Ballad. The retainer realizes the clue they need was part of Margit's inheritance all along. But Margit is furious, declaring she doesn't care about Oruto's past actions. Naya worries that they have no leads that their powerful rival doesn't already possess. The retainer's expression is grim, his mind racing for their next move. He shakes his head in denial, but then a sudden idea seems to strike him. He pulls out a thick, worn diary, declaring that they do have one clue. He explains the whiskey was from another world and this is his friend's journal. Margit's eyes widen in shock, asking if the recipe is really written inside, but the retainer can only look down, admitting he's not entirely sure. So much for a foolproof plan. The journal is a chaotic mix of languages, most of which Elpis can't decipher. He admits his goals and Oruto's are the same, and Margit's success is the key, but Nao's sharp eyes spot a familiar script among the strange characters. She identifies the language as Japanese, from a land in the Far East. Elpis is completely stunned, questioning how she could possibly read it. Nao admits she can read a little, a skill from a past she'd rather forget. Margit puts it together. The author of this journal was Elpis's best friend. A man known to the world as the legendary hero Tanaka. Of course his name is Tanaka. The name hits them like a lightning bolt, the S-rank hero who fought with Mazari. Elpis just looks away, completely flustered by the sudden massive reveal. Margit connects the dots, realizing Tanaka was the leader who once challenged Mazari. The entire party is left reeling from this massive revelation. Nao explains that Japanese is a language from another world, questioning the link. Elpis listens intently, his own past suddenly becoming much clearer. The name Tanaka hangs in the air, a legend made suddenly real. Elpis recalls Tanaka saying his native tongue was similar to their common language. The memory brings a single tear to Nao's eye, a shared connection to another world. Elpis's expression hardens, the weight of his friend's legacy settling on him. The story of the hero Tanaka is shocking, but they know Elpis isn't lying. Nao calls out his name, her voice filled with a new sense of urgency. Margit's eyes sparkle, asking if Elpis was part of the legendary hero's party. Nao realizes that if true, his incredible strength would finally make sense. The memory of Mazari's overwhelming power flashes through their minds. The two women look down at him with a newfound, almost giddy excitement. But Elpis looks away, admitting the truth is a little different from their grand theory. He explains he traveled with Tanaka after the battle, on a quest to become a brewer. The revelation that the legendary hero was also a merchant leaves them completely baffled. Their journey continues, the weight of this new information settling in. They arrive at a clearing, home to a monument known as the Adventurer's Stone. Nao admits this is the first time she's ever seen one of the legendary stones up close. Margit explains she learned about these stones during her training. Elvis listens intently, sensing there's more to this story. Nao asks if they know why it's called the Monument of the Defeated. The ominous name seems to catch Margit completely off guard. She can only offer a quiet, hesitant acknowledgement. It's because the hero Tanaka was defeated here by the evil god Mazari. Now clarifies this all happened before she was even born. Elpis explains that Tanaka was the pinnacle of his era, a symbol of freedom. His defeat allowed corrupt nobles to rise, plunging the lands into conflict. The war in the east raged for years until a figure named Shika appeared. Margit recalls her father's just rule, a time when all nobles were proud. But Elpis reveals his own past, admitting he was exiled from a monastery as a child. The two women can only stare, whispering his name in disbelief. He then confesses he killed the hero for the same reason Mazari did. The shocking revelation leaves both Margit and Nao completely speechless. But Margit suddenly lunges forward, wrapping him in a tight embrace. Her face is a mask of pure, overwhelming emotion. Elpis is left completely flustered by her unexpected reaction. Nao points out the obvious. Elpis is a half-blood, just like Mazari. She seems to understand, a quiet affirmation of this shared, painful truth. Nao realizes that deep down, Elpis isn't a bad person at all. The two women playfully mob him, leaving the stoic half-orc completely flustered. The story returns to the desolate wasteland where the hero Tanaka fell to Mazari. Elpis explains that the peace they now enjoy is nothing short of a miracle. Margit realizes this means Tanaka didn't actually die in that legendary battle. She pieces together the timeline, the hero's defeat, his survival, and his fateful meeting with Elpis. Elpis admits that when he first met the legendary hero, he was just as surprised. For him, it was the worst possible meeting, a time when persecution was at its peak. Nao asks about the details of the war, but even Margit is in the dark. It was a subject that the hero Tanaka stubbornly refused to ever speak of. Margit's expression is one of dawning, uncomfortable realization. Elpis's gaze is distant, lost in the weight of his own history. A single, unspoken question begins to form in Margit's mind. A question she's not entirely sure she wants the answer to. The two stand in silence, the truth of the past hanging heavy between them. But she holds her tongue, afraid to press him any further on the matter. Some truths, like ice and whiskey, are meant to melt away slowly. Elpis knew that to speak of it would be to lose something irreplaceable. The scene flashes back to a different time, a blonde woman calling his name. Back in the present, Margit admits their bond is new, asking for his trust in time. Nao can only look on, her expression a mix of confusion and quiet concern. Elpis looks down, the weight of his unspoken history plain on his face. But Margit offers a warm, disarming smile, asking him to tell her his story. She wants to know everything about the man who has become their companion. And so, the newly formed party continues their journey deeper into the woods. Nao notes his stoic silence, but Margit seems to understand completely. They walk on, their destination now just ahead of them. Elvis leads the way, his expression as unreadable as ever. They arrive at a simple, unmarked grave, a final resting place for a legend. Elvis closes his eyes, a silent moment of respect for the friend he lost. He admits that even the legendary hero was afraid. A list of the fallen details the brutal end of Tanaka's party at Mazari's hands. Only one survived, a saint who could only watch as the world called his friend a hero. In a memory, Tanaka shares a drink with a friend, the days of peace feeling like a lie. Elvis recalls the story, finding a bitter irony in the hero's tale. Because beneath the legend, Tanaka was just a man, terrified of his own fate. The story then shifts back to the bustling, corrupt streets of Landrace. Inside the city guard's interrogation room, a new investigation is underway. The orc hunter, Shiruka, is conducting her own brand of interrogation, for justice. But back in the woods, Elvis's expression hardens, his own path now clear. She erupts in denial, questioning why she'd ever be suspected of drug trafficking. The city guard lays out the facts. Her sponsor, Kinkira, was caught selling information. She deflects with a bizarre tangent about elves' compatibility with other races. Her interrogation methods become uncomfortably personal. She muses that one doesn't often get the chance to embrace an adventurer. The guard is completely overwhelmed as she demands he teach her everything. It seems her brand of justice involves a lot of hands-on investigation. The story then flashes back to a few days prior, to a mysterious cloaked figure. The figure is seen walking away after observing something from a distance. It's revealed that a monk-like man was arrested for possessing illegal drugs. Shiruka tries to deflect, pinning the blame on the half-blood she encountered. The memory cuts to the pig-faced retainer Elpis, his expression unreadable. The interrogation continues, with Shiruka demonstrating her brutal methods on a suspect. Her victim thanks her for the information, vowing to kill the orc she mentioned. She just looks down, completely unfazed by the man she just broke. Elsewhere, the mysterious silver-armored man examines a document with great interest. It's a security roster for the upcoming autumn festival. He learns a powerful figure, St. Alfred, is scheduled to visit the city. Looks like the guest list is getting interesting. Meanwhile, rumors of Kankira's downfall spread through the city's marketplace, and a new chapter begins for the vicious lady and the orc clan's Elpis. Back at the Varuna Trading Company, a new mission begins. The team assembles early, ready to decipher the hero's journal. Nayo takes the lead, her knowledge of Japanese making her the key. Margit declares she'll handle the Beastman script, eager to contribute. The unlikely trio combines their skills to decode Tanaka's cryptic notes. At first, Elpis tries to direct the effort, pointing out pages in order. But the task quickly becomes a frantic, high-energy race against time. Nayo realizes they need to cross-reference information between different pages, and Margit sees the connection, a breakthrough that leaves her absolutely ecstatic. Elpis, however, is completely unimpressed by their chaotic methods. So much for organized research. The three of them huddle together, their combined intellect focused on a single book. Elpis feels his brain shutting down, complaining that he's being used as a mere prop. Their work continues at the Varuna Trading Company, a place to plan their next move. The research devolves into chaos, with Elpis scrambling like a madman. But Margit's sharp eyes finally land on a crucial clue, a rare type of whiskey. The journal names it, Royal Valwea, a key ingredient for the Blessed Ballad. Nayo is taken aback, recognizing the majestic and rather intimidating name. Elpis pauses, the name jogging a distant, half-forgotten memory. Margit turns to him, her expression serious as she prepares to ask a question. She recalls her father speaking of a special liquor, one served only to royalty. Elpis admits that for a half-blood, acquiring even one of these liquors is a huge hurdle. Now realizes that for a former royal like Arudo, it would be a different story. Margit can only agree, the grim reality of their rival's advantage sinking in. They now know the scent on the letter was Valwea, the king's liquor. The scene shifts as a new pig-faced man named Prine walks through the city. He stops to thank a young girl, handing her a book for her help. The girl is left in tears, upset by his formal and distant goodbye. A memory surfaces for Elvis, recalling the time his entire party was wiped out. A younger Shiruka remembers her own loss, a trauma that shaped her entire life. Nayo listens, her own past echoing in the stories of those around her. Nayo's mind races, connecting the eye patch to that fateful day. Elpis offers a quiet, heartfelt thanks for her insight, but he's left completely baffled by the complex device in his hands. Margit, however, is fired up, ready to take on the role of leader. Varuna watches them with a knowing smile, enjoying the show. Elpis begins a bizarre training regimen. Their first step is a tough one. Varuna offers her support, but wants to hear the plan from Margit herself. Margit asks if there's a legend surrounding the elusive king's liquor. But she admits she has no connection to the royal family whatsoever. Varuna just sighs, telling her to change the way she's asking the question. Margit rephrases her question, asking who else could possess the king's liquor. The entire party hangs on Varuna's answer, their next move depending on it. Varuna offers a hint, speaking of a group close to royalty but separate from nobles. The clue leaves Margit stumped, her mind racing to find the answer. The answer is revealed. The Goshu border earls, descendants of war heroes. Elpis smirks, realizing his rookie leader might have some useful connections after all. He wonders if this is all just a test, a way for Varuna to gauge Margit's potential. Varuna explains these earls guard the border to Mazari's untamed lands. Margit finally understands. These earls are a class entirely apart from the nobles she knew. But Elpis realizes this revelation was just as unexpected for Varuna. Margit realizes the border earls are their only lead to the king's liquor. Elpis's gaze hardens, the weight of this new challenge settling in. Nayo considers the implications, knowing this path will be dangerous. But Margit admits that meeting such powerful figures won't be easy. Nayo's expression confirms the difficulty of their new mission. But Varuna chimes in, asking Elpis about a certain travel permit he might have. Elpis is completely dumbfounded, having no memory of such a thing. Guess he should clean out his wallet more often. Varuna then drops a bombshell. The Goshu border earl is already in Landrace. The news stuns them all. He's here to attend the upcoming hunting tournament. The entire party is left reeling, their impossible target now suddenly within reach. Margit can only stammer the words Autumn Festival hanging in the air. She questions the name of the event, the Ordigra Hunting Tournament. Varuna explains that their rival, Oruto, is sponsoring the event for adventurers. The news sends Margit into a rage, furious that he'd host a tournament in her city. The conversation continues in the quiet, spacious office of the Varuna Trading Company. Varuna adds that the Goshu border earl will also be in attendance. The merchant matriarch watches on with a calm, knowing smile. Elpis knows that Margit has no idea what's about to happen, because the woman standing before them is none other than Varuna Goshu, the border earl herself. Well, that's convenient. The story then flashes back, taking us 3 years into the past. Elpis recalls a time when his life took a very different turn. He was framed for a series of brutal murders on the border. But his name was cleared by one person, Varuna Goshu. He was hunted, a victim of the world's hatred for half-bloods. She offered him everything, fortune, fame, and even her love. All he had to do was agree to become her personal hero. The offer left the stoic adventurer completely flustered. But he left, unable to accept her kindness while chasing his friend's legacy. The memory leaves the present-day Elpis in a state of utter panic. Guess some memories are best left buried. And Varuna can't help but enjoy his sudden, flustered embarrassment. Varuna recalls hearing from Elpis about his long and desperate search for a whiskey, but she never imagined one of its ingredients was the legendary King's liquor. She remembers her offer, wondering why he still refuses to open his heart to her. Elpis's eye widens, the weight of their shared past suddenly crashing down. He can't even meet her gaze, trapped by a memory he tried so hard to leave behind. But Elpis is slowly changing, and perhaps Margit is the one who can grant his wish. Varuna sees this as a godsend, a new opportunity presenting itself through Margit. The young noble is completely unaware of the political game she's just stumbled into. Varuna explains the border earls are always seeking powerful adventurers for a reason. She issues a challenge, win the hunting tournament and prove their worth to her. Varuna's smile is a mix of challenge and quiet amusement. Elpis can only stare, the weight of his past crashing down on him. But Margit's eyes burn with a new, unwavering determination. Elpis meets her gaze, his own resolve hardening into steel. The three companions kneel, accepting the terms of this high-stakes game. She vows to win the tournament and secure a sponsor for their party. Varuna seems pleased, her intricate plan falling perfectly into place. Elpis and Nao stand ready, a silent promise of their shared commitment. She offers them the leftover funds, a small investment in their future success. Their first stop is a shop called Damocles, a fitting name for the danger ahead. Elpis leads the way, his massive frame dwarfing his two companions. The trio arrives at the entrance, ready to gear up for the trials ahead. Inside, they find a treasure trove of weapons, a true adventurer's paradise. Nao spots a dwarven crest, a clear sign of the shop's high quality. Their goal is simple: upgrade their gear to survive the coming tournament. Elpis calls out for the shopkeeper, ready to get down to business. But the shop's owner immediately refuses to serve any half-bloods. Elpis's eye twitches, but he calmly states that his money is good here. The owner relents, admitting her shop doesn't turn away paying customers. And the shopkeeper is revealed to be Shika, a legendary figure from the Eastern Wars. Well, this just got complicated. Nio is completely stunned by the shopkeeper's identity, as Elpis notes that she's a dwarf. A quick rundown of the adventurer hierarchy reveals the daunting odds they face. Elpis and Margit are just as shocked, questioning why this legendary figure is here. The narration explains that A-rank adventurers are the absolute peak of power on the continent, and this shopkeeper, Shika, is one of them, the number 2 of the A-rank party, Sirius Shield. She recognizes him, calling out Elpis's name and noting the strange coincidence. Now looks to her companions, completely unsure of how to proceed in this high-level encounter. Shika's expression is grim, admitting she knows the terror of a past foe better than anyone. Elpis remains stoic, a silent observer in this unexpected and very tense reunion. Just another Tuesday. But Shika holds up a hand, ordering Margit to step back at least 6 paces from her. But Margit puffs up, indignantly declaring that she is the party's leader. Elpis cuts her off, his voice low as he tells her to stand down. The order leaves Margit completely flustered, her authority immediately challenged. Now questions the shopkeeper's logic, wondering why she isn't being targeted as well. Shika simply dismisses them, declaring that she has no customers here. She gets in Elpis's face, questioning why a half-blood would dare enter her sister's shop. The legendary adventurer then warns him not to mention her height, or there will be blood. but Elpis just smirks, admitting he's considered small for an orc himself. A bold move, let's see if it pays off. Shika's tone suddenly shifts, offering a handshake to make up for the hostility. Elpis's eye narrows, his suspicion growing at this sudden change of heart. Elpis meets her challenge with a confident grin, ready for whatever she has planned. The handshake quickly escalates into an arm wrestling match to settle things peacefully. The sheer force of their struggle shatters the barrel beneath them. Now and Margit can only watch in shock from a safe distance. Shika's confidence shatters as Elpis's raw power begins to overwhelm her. She can't believe it, questioning how she could ever lose a contest of pure strength. Nio urges Margit to escape, but the young noble refuses to run. Margit's gaze is firm, her resolve unshaken by the display of power. Nio can only look on, completely baffled by her lady's decision. But Margit stands her ground, ready to face whatever comes next. Elpis grits his teeth, admitting that his raw power is superior, but Shika pushes back, declaring that her sheer toughness is on another level. The floorboards splinter and crack under the immense pressure. The two remain locked in a brutal stalemate, neither willing to give an inch. From the sidelines, Margit watches with an unreadable expression. But a sudden step forward shatters the tense standoff. Shika suddenly erupts, yelling at her sister for her terrible treatment of a customer. The sudden turn of events leaves Elpis completely bewildered. Margit is just as stunned, her jaw practically on the floor. Even Nio is left flustered, a faint blush creeping onto her cheeks. The tall, imposing woman continues to scold the legendary adventurer. Shika can only mutter her sister's name, Warabi, under her breath. Warabi reminds her that she's been told time and again to be polite to customers. Margit and Nio can only watch as this A-rank powerhouse gets a family lecture. Elpis cuts through the drama, asking if this woman is the true owner of the shop. The question seems to catch Shika completely off guard. She's stunned, admitting this is the first customer she's met with eyes like her sister's. And just like that, the tension in the room completely evaporates. Shika's mood flips entirely, now eagerly offering to help them gear up for the tournament. The party can only bow in thanks, completely baffled by this bizarre turn of events. The narration describes Warabi, the scent of fire and iron clinging to her like a master craftsman. Margit can only stare, asking if this imposing woman is really Shika's older sister. Shika's entire demeanor has changed, now treating Elpis with a strange familiarity. She notes that his scent is remarkably similar to her sister's. Elpis wonders if her eyes are like Mazari's, questioning the nature of beastmen. Nio explains the rarity of half-bloods, a lesson in this world's complex genetics. Margit realizes that by this logic, half-blood siblings are a statistical impossibility. With the tension broken, Shika begins outfitting the party for the tournament. She points out a common weapon, a mace known simply as the Tulip. It's a standard-issue weapon for rookies, perfect for climbing the ranks to C-class. Margit asks if they can upgrade her weapon, and Shika confidently agrees to the task. She immediately gets to work, taking Margit's handprint to craft a custom grip. The promise of a more powerful and easier-to-use weapon leaves Margit a bit flustered. Margit then declares that they are in direct opposition to the new Lord Oruto. The statement seems to catch the legendary adventurer's full attention. Shika reveals she's already heard about their situation from her sister, Mazari. The mention of Oruto's A-rank enforcer leaves Margit completely speechless. Elpis and Nio can only watch as their simple shopping trip gets infinitely more complicated. Elpis lets out a quiet grunt, processing this new and dangerous connection. His mind flashes back to Warabi's words, a warning that he might one day face Shika in battle. Shika's tough exterior melts away, calling the young lady surprisingly kind. But Warabi's gaze is cold, explaining a craftsman's duty is to forge, not to judge. She warns Margit that it's naive to think a blade won't be turned on her own family. Shika agrees, declaring that to create a weapon is to create a tool for killing. The party can only listen, getting a harsh lesson in the realities of their world. Warabi then reassures Shika, noting her sister is strong enough not to worry. But Margit's eyes narrow, her resolve hardening in the face of their lecture. Elpis watches on, calling their grandstanding nothing more than pure arrogance. Warabi then issues a chilling warning. She's not as soft as Oruto. The threat immediately devolves into a sibling spat, with Shika accusing her of being soft. Shika points, questioning if Elpis truly believes he can handle her in a fight. Her gaze then shifts to the massive, intimidating weapon strapped to his back. She recognizes the great Sinner Duke Orcus, asking if it's been properly maintained. Elpis can only grit his teeth, the pressure in the room becoming unbearable. Shika warns him that as he is now, he'll be completely devoured in the tournament. The harsh but honest assessment leaves Nao completely taken aback. Even Margit is stunned into silence by the legendary adventurer's blunt words. Shika explains the nature of orcish weapons, forged to channel raw muscle into magic. Warabi adds that for years, the orcs' hidden village was a source of great evil, until 10 years ago, when a single rookie adventurer destroyed it all in one go. Shika's eyes narrow, asking if his weapon was a spoil from that very battle. Her mind flashes back to the tavern, to another adventurer who hated orcs. Nao's eyes widen in dawning horror as she puts the pieces together. The entire party stands frozen as the truth hangs heavy in the air. The pig-faced retainer, Elpis, finally admits that she's figured it out. Shika recalls her own rookie days, a time of fierce rivals and legendary figures. Elpis confesses he always meant to tell them about killing his own kind, just casual party banter. Margit listens intently, her expression a mix of shock and dawning understanding. The revelation leaves Nao completely speechless, her world turned upside down. The two sisters look on as the party grapples with this impossible truth. The two sisters stand in a tense, chibi-fied silence. Shika suddenly apologizes for speaking so freely about his past. Elpis just grunts, accepting her apology but clearly not forgetting it. But Margit steps forward, clenching her fist with renewed determination. She then turns away, a sudden blush of embarrassment on her face. The sudden shift in mood leaves even the stoic Elpis completely baffled. Nao chimes in, cheekily asking if she can try out his legendary weapon. The request is met with a furious rejection, sparking a new argument. Because the last bombshell wasn't enough drama for one day. Shika cuts through the noise, pointing out that Elpis is now the party's weak link. She explains that in the tournament, a weapon's true power is drawn from the user's soul. Shika reflects on the Eastern conflict, calling her actions a justified failure. But Nao has a suspicion, a connection forming in her mind. A memory flashes back, framing her as justice and her opponents as evil. The memory is cut short as she looks up, completely bewildered. Nao is just as lost, her own theory hitting a sudden wall. Shika recalls meeting this person twice after the war in the East, and with a gasp, Nao finally puts the pieces together. Elpis's eye narrows, the truth dawning on him as well. She can't believe it, realizing the impossible truth about Elpis. Shika sighs in frustration, asking if he really doesn't remember her at all. Nao can only look on, a quiet anger simmering beneath the surface. But Shika just waves them off, cheerfully thanking them for their business. As they walk, the townspeople whisper about the vicious lady and the orc hunter. But the party seems unfazed, with Margit admitting it's been a long day. Their minds turn to dinner, planning a stew to celebrate their new gear. Elpis closes his eyes, savoring this rare moment of peace with his companions. Margit's laughter echoes through the streets, free from the day's tension. Even Nao offers a small, genuine smile, her earlier worries forgotten. The unlikely trio continues on, their journey just beginning. But for Elpis, this newfound comfort feels both welcome and strangely unsettling. A simple thought drifts through the air. Someday, a quiet resolve forms, a silent promise to the future. A determined gaze is fixed on the path that lies ahead. Margit's mind wanders to a future filled with happiness for her companions. Nao seems to share the sentiment, a rare moment of quiet hope. A future where they can finally raise a glass and toast to their success. But that future is shattered by a sudden, violent explosion. Elpis freezes, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. Margit screams in horror, realizing their own base is engulfed in flames. Well, so much for that stew they were planning. Nao can only stare, whispering that their home is burning to the ground. From the shadows, a cloaked figure watches the chaos unfold. But the orc hunter, Sharuka, can only laugh at their misfortune. Nao is frozen in disbelief, unable to process the scene before her. Their home, the one place they had, is now nothing but an inferno. Margit's horror deepens as she remembers her mother's dress is inside. Even the stoic Elpis is shaken, a rare look of panic on his face. The sight of the flames seems to trigger something deep within him. A memory surfaces, a story about fire told by a familiar face from Nao's past. The man reveals he possesses 3 distinct types of inherent magic. One of them allows him to carve magical runes to aid in spellcasting. His second ability is a teleportation loop, a trick he theorized himself. He tells a young Nao he got the idea from his companion's gambling habits. He then reveals a crucial weakness. Beastmen are vulnerable to fire. The young Nao listens, absorbing every word of this dangerous lesson. He explains their high body temperature makes fire magic especially debilitating. This is a story he's never told anyone, a secret shared only with her. And now he reveals his third and most powerful inherent magic, a terrifying ability known simply as the Black Fire. He demonstrates, tossing a strange substance that erupts with explosive force. The bandit leader identifies the source as a simple but potent black powder. The bandit leader grins, pleased with the explosive reaction. He demonstrates, flicking a small pellet that detonates on impact. The campfire flares, a testament to his strange and powerful ability. He explains this isn't magic, but a medicine that creates fire. These are the seeds of calamity from his world, contained in small shells. The memory brings a single tear to Nao's eye in the present. Once created, this power could lay waste to entire groups of people. The pig-faced man explains it's a substitute for magic, a gift from another world, so even a kid could be an arsonist. Great. The memory then shifts to the starving boy she once tried to help. He glares back, defiantly declaring that he is nobody's dog. The boy's words still echo, a bitter rejection of her kindness. And in the present, Nao sees that same destructive fire in her reflection. She recalls her leader's lesson. Fire is civilization, but its true nature is destruction. But the flames trigger a reaction in someone else, the retainer, Elpis. A deep, primal terror washes over him. The man is afraid of fire. His nose twitches, sensing something more than just smoke in the air. Margaret is frozen, her mind racing for a way to stop the disaster. She wants to rush in, desperate to save her mother's dress from the inferno. Elpis can only stare, his usual stoicism completely shattered by the sight. But his shock gives way to resolve, his eye narrowing with cold determination. Elpis curses himself, furious at his own hesitation in the face of the flames. But he snaps into action, grabbing a massive barrel of water from a nearby well. Margaret and Nao can only call out his name in shock, stunned by his sudden move. He tells them to stay back, vowing to retrieve the precious dress himself. But Margaret argues, insisting she can use her shadow magic to teleport inside. Elpis immediately shuts her down, his voice cold and absolute. He explains that a raging fire warps space, and her teleport would be a fatal mistake. A failed jump would be like slamming into a wall of pure destructive energy. The boundary between the inside and outside of the inferno is too unstable for her to cross. Nao can only look on, her protest dying on her lips as she sees his resolve. But Elpis ignores their pleas, taking a single powerful step forward. As they scream his name, he charges headfirst into the raging inferno. The searing heat immediately assaults him, a brutal test of his resolve. Instead of holding his breath, he takes a deep, controlled inhale. His powerful sense of smell begins to separate the air itself. Nao realizes the danger, screaming that his nose will suck in the poison. But he filters it, breathing only the pure oxygen carried on the wind. He plants his feet, a lone figure standing against the heart of the blaze. But the heat is overwhelming, his vision blurring as his body begins to fail. And just as he pushes forward, a massive explosion rips through the cottage. He pushes deeper into the inferno, his resolve hardening against the heat. Sweat and tears mix as the searing heat pushes him to his absolute limit. He curses the memory of a fool, a ghost from a past he can't escape. And through the flames, a familiar figure appears, a convenient illusion of his lost friend. Elpis grits his teeth, a mountain of unspoken words for the hero, Tanaka. He remembers screaming at him, asking why he was left behind that fateful day. He recalls asking why Tanaka never told him about the one who defeated him. The hero's face remains a mask of calm indifference in his memory. His only response was a cold, dismissive question. Peak friendship goals. Elpis screams at the memory, demanding to know why he was kept in the dark about the golden-eyed Mazari. He admits he wanted to stand by Tanaka, to be part of his final adventure. But now, surrounded by flames, he questions what being a companion even means. He curses his own weakness, admitting he always wanted to be one of them. He knew he was just a half-blood, despised by everyone and just trying to survive. But even so, all he ever truly wanted was a place to belong. He remembers reaching out, saving Nao from her own darkness. A voice echoes in his mind, telling him this reckless act isn't like him at all. He recalls Margaret and Nao, the two who finally called him their companion. And he admits to himself that he's starting to like this new, reckless version of himself. But his resolve shatters as the inferno finally overwhelms him, sending him to his knees. A city guard addresses the crowd, blaming the fire on the half-blood living among them. A young guard watches on, his expression filled with a growing sense of unease. He tries to warn a local tavern owner, but the man already senses the danger. The tavern owner's eye narrows. He knows this wasn't an accident, but a deliberate act. The young guard looks on, regretting that he ignored Margit's plight for so long. And from the shadows, the true culprits emerge, a squad of masked enforcers. Outside the inferno, Margit and Nao can only scream Elpis's name in terror. Margit is crushed by her own helplessness, realizing she sent her companion into the fire. Through her tears, a painful truth finally dawns on the young noble. She understands she's not yet strong enough to even stand beside him as an equal. Guess the B team is still on the bench for this one. She remembers wanting to be a true companion, to one day ask him what a partner truly is. Her hand clenches her own hair, a gesture of pure, frustrating shame. But that shame hardens into a fierce declaration of her own. She screams that this powerlessness feels like a curse she can't seem to break. She admits she's a fool, watching from safety while Elpis risked everything for her sake. Through her tears, she can only beg for him to come back to them. But Nao cuts through the grief, coldly stating that it's just a dress. The words earn her a sharp, stinging slap from her lady. Well, that's one way to handle grief counseling. Margit looks away, a single tear tracing a path through the soot on her cheek. She turns back in shock, her friend's name a stunned whisper on her lips. But Nao looks up, her voice steady as she addresses her lady. A memory echoes her promise, even if Margit were foolish or weak. Even if she were no longer a noble, Nao would always be there for her. And inside the inferno, Elpis knows that dress is more than just an object. It's a symbol of their bond, a truth he understands all too well. Nao declares she'll be a coward as many times as it takes to protect her. She warns Margit not to become a coward who tramples on her own heart. And with a quiet gasp, the young noble finally understands. She remembers Nao went into debt just to buy back that precious dress. Because for Nao, being Margit's maid isn't a job. It is her pride. He fights through the inferno, a man who once lost everything, now risking it all to protect a new bond. A single tear falls, a testament to the pain he's pushing through for their sake. The heat is unbearable, his body screaming in protest against the raging flames. Margit recalls her past, a selfish desire to protect her own heart disguised as helping others. But a new voice cuts in, as the orc hunter Shiruka arrives to mock their despair. With a manic grin, she congratulates them on finally becoming true villains. A new figure appears on the scene, a woman who calls out the elf's full name, Shiruka Sharbek. But Shiruka just skips away, taunting the newcomer about her dead parents. Classy. Her cruel words hang in the air, a final insult to the woman's lost honor. And with a confident smile, she declares this is all to surpass the new lord, Oruto. The masked woman stands firm, her gaze fixed on the manic elf. Shiruka just lets out a wild, unhinged laugh at the chaos. She sneers, promising that this is just the beginning of their suffering. But the newcomer retorts, calling this a taste of misfortune and humiliation. One of the enforcers realizes that with Elpis gone, now is their chance to strike. The masked squad moves in, ready to eliminate Margit and end this conflict. But Margit's gaze is steady, her fear replaced by cold, unwavering resolve. With a manic grin, Shiruka gives the order for her enforcers to attack. Nao can only call out her lady's name, helpless on the ground. But a hand flashes out, tossing a piece of equipment into the fray. Margit catches the gauntlet, screaming her thanks to Nao for the timely assist. The enforcer's attack slams into a newly formed barrier of light. The force of the impact shatters the attacker's mask completely. From the sidelines, the silver-armored Elpis watches because of course he's here for the show. The two women use the opening to create some much-needed distance. Nao prepares a counterattack, channeling the power of fire magic. She unleashes a massive fireball, a desperate blast of raw power. But she's stunned by her own spell, realizing she cast it without an incantation. The flames part to reveal Shiruka, completely unharmed by the attack. The orc hunter just scoffs, finding their desperate struggle predictable and boring. The masked woman's resolve is absolute, her eyes burning with conviction. She unleashes her own attack, a blur of shadow magic striking from below. The blow connects, a brutal kick that sends the orc hunter reeling. Shiruka is sent flying across the clearing, completely caught off guard. The masked woman declares her martial arts are superior, telling Shiruka to surrender. But Shiruka just spits, offering some less than constructive feedback on Nao's fighting style. The masked woman's gaze hardens, knowing this fight is far from over. Her gauntlet flares with power, a hidden ability finally activating. But she suddenly chokes, an unseen force constricting her throat. Shiruka rises with a triumphant grin, revealing this was all part of her plan. Nao gasps for air, her body burning from an unseen magical affliction. This is the seal of the bull's flame, a curse that marks its target with debilitating heat. Shiruka condescendingly taps the maid's head, her victory all but assured. She stands over her defeated opponent, a picture of absolute dominance. The elf mocks her, noting Nao's shadow magic is useless for evasion now. She calls Nao's power a rotting treasure, one she'd gladly claim for herself. It's a shame, she muses, for someone with such rare inherent magic to be so weak. Her gaze is cold, her judgment absolute, a complete and utter waste. She then offers a twisted proposal, a connection between the two of them. Margit can only watch in horror, completely powerless to help her friend. But a memory of her training cuts through the chaos. A sudden brutal impact echoes as the tide of battle turns. Shiruka looks up to see Margit standing over her defeated enforcers. Her new weapon, the modified tulip, gleams with latent power. She wields the war mace Heaven's Knocker, a custom piece from Warabi. Guess the shopping trip paid off. Shiruka realizes she misjudged them, recalling the C-rank beast they faced. A flashback reveals Margit learning to channel fire magic into her strikes. The sudden display of power leaves the remaining enforcers completely stunned. But as Margit grabs her, she's shocked by the elf's incredible physique. The sheer gap in their physical strength leaves the young noble horrified. But Shiruka's body is tough, absorbing the blow with a pained grunt. The impact triggers a memory, a flash of a painful and unwelcome past. A flashback reveals a younger Shiruka with her sister, who calls her weak but beloved. Her sister tells her to come and try to kill her again and again. You know, normal sibling stuff. She then offers a grotesque gift, a pair of severed ears as earrings. The memory echoes with her sister's twisted declaration of love for Shiruka. Back in the present, Shiruka retaliates with a vicious kick of her own. The blow sends Margit flying, her new weapon knocked from her grasp. Shiruka shakes off the impact, her arm momentarily numb from the force. But she quickly recovers, pulling out a potion to get right back in the fight. Shiruka downs a potion, finally understanding why Margit infuriates her so much. Margit is fighting to reclaim her place, ready to face even A-rank monsters. But Shiruka declares there is a fundamental difference between the two of them. She mockingly offers to hire Margit, a cruel jab at the fallen noble's pride. But Margit's fury erupts, telling the elf that defeat is the only title she deserves. With a single word, she rejects the elf's entire twisted philosophy. Her war mace unleashes a massive pillar of light, its true power awakened. Nao can only look up with a proud, tearful smile at her lady's strength. The sudden surge of power leaves even the manic Shiruka completely stunned. Margit meets her gaze with a confident smile. The tables finally turned. But just as the battle rages, a figure emerges from the heart of the inferno. A massive explosion of steam erupts as Elpis walks out of the flames. He just smirks, calling the raging fire nothing more than a lukewarm sauna. Margit and Nao rush to him, their relief palpable as he stands victorious. She tackles him in a hug, noticing his hair has been singed by the heat. Nao can only cry, noting the dress he saved is only slightly burned. Through her tears, Margit thanks her little piggy for his incredible bravery. Nao scolds him for not taking a potion, but he just brushes off her concern. But their reunion is cut short as Shiruka approaches from the distance. She sneers, mocking the orc hunter for nearly becoming a roasted pig. Elpis's eye narrows, his focus locking onto the elf's taunting words. He looks at the ruins, noting that for outlaws like them, city laws are a flimsy shield. A passage from Tanaka's journal explains the harsh truth of their world. Shiruka just laughs, mocking them for thinking the rules apply out here. Nao can only glare, her disgust for the elf plain on her face. Margit's fury is a silent storm, her eyes promising retribution. Shiruka dares them to report it, knowing a half-blood's word means nothing. But Margit cuts through the taunts, questioning why Shiruka is so obsessed with Elpis. The masked woman reappears, demanding to know the elf's true objective. Looks like the B-plot is back on. But Shiruka just turns her back, walking away from the confrontation without another word. The question leaves Shiruka completely and utterly baffled. She explains her fame is already set in stone, with fans cheering her on to hunt orcs. Nao can only look on, completely lost by the elf's twisted logic. Elpis just scoffs, clearly unimpressed by her grandstanding. The masked woman's gaze hardens, her patience finally at its end. Shiruka explains the cycle. Adventurers get popular, and merchants profit from their fame. She holds up the burnt dress, asking if they really need an explanation for why she hunts orcs. To her, hunting monsters and hunting orcs are one and the same. She sees their plight as a convenient opportunity, a perfect setup for her own narrative. And behind her, the city's prejudice rears its ugly head, a mob demanding death to all orcs. Elpis just smirks, completely unfazed by her self-righteous monologue. Nao's fury boils over, calling the elf nothing more than a common scumbag. But Sharuka explains that in this world, justice is just a product of fame and results. The masked woman questions her conviction, asking if this is truly a mission or just a game. The elf scoffs at the idea, sneering that people are born with their value already set. She declares that even if the people don't want her, she'll return as this city's true ruler. And behind her, the mob roars its approval, a perfect audience for her twisted stage play. The masked woman calls out her hypocrisy, questioning this twisted sense of duty. Nao can only spit the elf's name, her hatred a palpable force. She steps forward, vowing to kill Sharuka if she dares to insult her lady again. Sharuka sneers, daring Nao to use that same magic to try and defeat her. Nao's gaze hardens, her resolve meeting the elf's challenge head-on. But a flicker of doubt crosses her face. The power gap is undeniable. Sharuka sees it, declaring Nao has the same eyes as her, the eyes of a defeated dog. The cruel words hit their mark, a single tear tracing a path of shame. The scene flashes to a memory of a woman with glasses, her expression unreadable. Elpis looks on, quietly noting the similarity in their defiant gazes. He then addresses Sharuka, admitting her scent is strangely familiar to him. The comment sends the elf into a bizarre, flirty fit of excitement. Guess she has a type. But Elpis's nose picks up something else, the scent of earnest emotion, like a flower blooming in the mud. He reveals she reminds him of a half-blood elf from his past, a mass murderer known as the Ear Collector. But Sharuka just looks confused, admitting she never really listens to what people say. He recalls how she would always speak of her sister with a strange, manic glee. The memory hits her like a physical blow, her composure completely shattering. A flashback reveals they once hunted orcs together, back when she was a true adventurer. Her mission was to liberate the elf servants often found in orc villages. She screams at him, demanding to know just how much he remembers about her past. He recalls that Elpis had already defeated the Orc King back in his rookie days. Margit can only watch the pieces of this twisted history falling into place. The whole situation leaves her completely baffled and more than a little annoyed. Guess this isn't in the rookie handbook. Elpis continues his thought, questioning why orcs always appear wherever Sharuka goes. The scene cuts to the silver-armored Elpis as a memory reveals a strange armored figure whose mask cracks open. The silver-armored Elpis is caught in a sudden attack, realizing he's been cornered. A massive figure looms over Margit and Nao, questioning if the higher-ups are finally involved. And the man behind it all, Oruto, appears with a manic grin, welcoming the main act to his stage. He descends before a massive crowd, hailed as their new leader and Sword King. The scene shifts again, showing a different group standing together in the pouring rain. The silver-armored Elpis grits his teeth, his resolve hardening in the face of this new threat. He unleashes a torrent of power, his energy swirling around him like a storm. His gaze is cold and sharp, a silent promise of the battle that is about to begin. Elpis and Nao stand together, their expressions grim under the heavy downpour. The elf Sharuka can only stare in disbelief, her smug facade finally cracking. And in the streets, the mob's cheers for Oruto echo through the rain-soaked city. Margit stands alone, the weight of the world crashing down on her once again. The rain continues to fall, a cold and indifferent witness to their despair. She remembers another rainy night, the one her father was taken from her. Elsewhere, a shadowy figure stands amidst the ruins of a once grand room. Margit's scream of anguish cuts through the memory, a cry of pure desperation. She collapses to the ground, broken and defeated by an unseen force. Looks like her bad day just got a whole lot worse. And the cloaked figure looks on, their dark power swirling around them like a shroud. The silver-armored Elpis's eye glints with a cold, sharp light. Elsewhere, Mazari clutches her head, a memory of a golden eye surfacing. Margit's thoughts drift to her father, convinced he was murdered. Her mind flashes to the man responsible for it all, Oruto. His reptilian gaze seems to watch from the shadows of her memory. The memory of their first clash hangs heavy in the air. Oruto's cheerful greeting cuts through the downpour, directed at the retainer Elpis. The retainer can only glare back, his face grim and soaked. Mazari calls out to her leader, her voice filled with concern. But Oruto just looks on, completely unimpressed by their defiance. Sharuka clutches her chest, telling Oruto this is just a small skirmish. But Elpis tells Nao to get rid of the tail, dismissing the elf completely. Shiruka screams at Arudo, questioning his grand plans for the city. Margaret and her companions can only watch as the villains argue amongst themselves. Arudo just sighs, his patience for the orc hunter clearly at its end. He coldly informs her that she is nothing more than a business partner to him. The brutal dismissal leaves the manic elf completely stunned. She tries to argue, but her words are lost in the pouring rain. Arudo turns his back, his overwhelming presence parting the storm itself. Guess he doesn't do dramatic goodbyes. Shiruka is left in awe of his power, a level of magic she never thought possible. A flashback reveals Shiruka's true mission, given to her by the elven royalty. She was willing to make any deal, just to be acknowledged by her own people. But Arudo coldly reminds her that she will never be on his level. He holds her to their original agreement, a deal she can't escape. Defeated, Shiruka can only offer a quiet, submissive agreement. Arudo then mentions a new name, Casper of the Bewitching Voice. The name sends a jolt of shock through the retainer, Elpis. Arudo reveals his true goal, the secret recipe for the legendary whiskey. Now's eyes widen, the word whiskey hanging in the air, and Margaret realizes he's after the very ingredients they've been searching for. Shiruka can only offer a quiet, defeated agreement. Arudo offers her the recipe in exchange for her power as an A-rank adventurer. But Mazari questions his timing, wondering if this is truly the right moment. The party stands united, a small island of defiance in a storm of power. Arudo's gaze is unreadable, a silent question hanging in the air. Shiruka admits her shame, realizing she's been reduced to exploiting Elpis's weakness. The rain masks the tears on Elpis's face, his resolve completely unbroken. But the elf declares they are her prey, and this hunt has only just begun. Arudo then turns his attention to the young noble, calling out Margaret's name. Margaret meets his gaze without flinching, her defiance burning even in the downpour. Arudo dismisses her concerns, stating he won't engage in baseless arguments. He then turns the question back on her, asking what she intends to do now. Margaret's gaze is a storm of defiance, even as the rain pours down. Elpis just looks on, completely over this villainous monologuing. She points forward, declaring she'll settle this with him as an adventurer. Now worries they'll be framed, but Elpis seems to sympathize with Margaret's stand. Shiruka just smirks, clearly enjoying the escalating drama. Arudo accepts, declaring the hunting tournament will decide the fate of their parties. But Margaret's challenge is for Shiruka, vowing to settle their score in the tournament.